His path was not dictated by others but by his own desires. Perhaps he had truly reached his limit. The divine beings, the gods beyond the tribulation, they were his destination. "All right, I've said my piece. You can continue your fight." Weiss' voice echoed as his form transformed into a rainbow, blending into the fabric of space, completely disappearing. Before them stood no trace of Weiss's presence, not even a hint of his departure. No one knew where Weiss had gone, but they knew Jian Wushuang was acquainted with him. "Friend Jian Wushuang, you know such a powerful god?" Divine Wood King now believed that Jian Wushuang's background was not simple. Although Elder Blue had a sharp tongue, he had been put in his place by Weiss, acknowledging Jian Wushuang's strength. Weiss was right. It was just the limited information they had received. Jian Wushuang hesitated for a moment, then glanced at the others. He awkwardly smiled and said, "There's no need to worry. He won't come out again. We just met by chance." He didn't have the audacity to use Weiss to intimidate them. When Weiss left, he made it clear. He could act as he pleased, and he wouldn't care if anyone here died. It was merely a correction of Elder Blue's words. At the same time, Weiss mentioned the title of Realm King. This was the first time Jian Wushuang had heard of it, but Divine Wood King had long been aware. These powerful beings seemed unprepared to act now, but instead began discussing matters concerning the gods. "I suggest we share all the information we have about the gods and then discuss the rest," Divine Wood King proposed. Elder Blue agreed immediately, and Lord Hengmu hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. Then they all looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang naturally had no reason to refuse. He was eager to learn about the rumors surrounding the gods, especially since he knew Weiss. That was his biggest advantage. "Let me start. My acquaintance with the Realm King mentioned by the esteemed person just now happened within the Wanlu. I attracted the attention of the Realm King when I was studying the rules of the 9 tribulations." Elder Blue spoke in detail, and everyone listened intently. Elder Blue was originally a native powerhouse within the Wanlu Divine Wood, a special life form that didn't need to undergo tribulation. So, he sought to break through the rules of the 9 tribulations. But it wasn't easy. He couldn't find a breakthrough. So, he went mad, slaughtering and plundering within the Wanlu Divine Tree, seeking to strengthen himself, wanting to break through all barriers. This scene was precisely observed by the Realm King, who then reminded everyone of it and appointed him as the guardian of the God of Life. In the northern spacetime, which encompasses 9 major spacetimes, there was a vacant position for the God of Life. This position would be filled in the future, a future that was now unfolding. Following the monk's speech, it was Lord Hengmu's turn. He didn't know much about the gods, but he had some knowledge about the path to godhood. The path to godhood lay within the Wuxia Divine Tree. However, Lord Hengmu wasn't particularly concerned about it. He hadn't thought about becoming a god. He just wanted the treasure that Divine Wood King would snatch away. This treasure was somehow related to the path to godhood. It was the same treasure he stumbled upon within the Wanlu Divine Tree, leading him to discover it. From Lord Hengmu's words, Jian Wushuang understood that Lord Hengmu was originally a native powerhouse within the Wuxia Divine Tree, merely using the name of an insignificant outsider. Many powerful beings had entered the Wanlu Divine Realm in the past. Among them was a universe master of the 3rd Tribulation Realm who entered with a large group but perished, only to be replaced by the current Lord Hengmu. Both Divine Wood King and the monk had known this, and Jian Wushuang had suspected it before. It was Wu Li who was the last to realize this. He too was a native powerhouse within the Wanlu Divine Tree, but Lord Hengmu had let him go because he was just a child. Within the barrier set up by the monk after Lord Hengmu finished speaking, everyone turned to look at Divine Wood King, one of the oldest 8 Tribulation Realm powerhouses in the ancient moon spacetime, who should have the most knowledge. What I know is similar to what Lord Hengmu knows, but there are some rumors you might not be aware of. Divine Wood King paused for a moment before continuing. You should be aware of the founder of the ancient moon spacetime, the former Celestial Maiden, a 9 Tribulation Realm powerhouse. You might call her a god, and I believe she is, in a sense, a god of creation. Although we never met, when I and the first-generation Pope of the ancient Moon Temple entered the core of the spacetime origin source, we saw her figure. She didn't truly perish. Her essence merged with the ancient Moon spacetime, becoming one with this world. This matter was actually well known among the higher-ups. It did satisfy Jian Wushuang, this kind of insignificant figure in the lower ranks. Since the first time he entered the ancient Moon spacetime, he encountered the Celestial Maiden, blocking his way. There was speculation that she might not have perished. Even those in the seventh tribulation realm could plan for what happens after death, let alone a powerful figure in the ninth tribulation realm. There must be some undisclosed secrets. What Divine Wood King said afterward seemed quite casual. Initially, the Celestial Maiden only informed them that there were gods beyond the ninth tribulation realm. And these gods were not only classified by type but also by rank. It's just that how this ranking was divided was unknown. After hearing the words of Divine Wood King, they felt like he hadn't said anything at all. Since it was an exchange of information before the battle, it all depended on each person's sincerity. No one dared to ask further. Perhaps the next moment would be a fight to the death. Finally, everyone's gaze converged on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was concocting a story in his mind. Seeing everyone looking at him, he cleared his throat and began, "My story. I actually don't know much about it myself. As you all must be aware, I am not a native powerhouse of the ancient Moon spacetime. I come from the other side of the starry sky, which is closer to the realm of the gods. By a stroke of luck I encountered." His story was somewhat absurd, but everyone listened intently, without a hint of suspicion. They found it quite engaging. Jian Wushuang even admired his own storytelling skills. In short, he encountered Weiss because of his great future achievements, and Weiss was just making some early investments in him. Just gave him a few pointers casually. Divine Wood King listened intently, somewhat curious, and asked, "Friend Wushuang, did this Lord Weiss mention where your path to godhood lies? This is indescribable, but he will come eventually," Jian Wushuang said with a feigned depth. The crowd nodded repeatedly. Among those present, Lord Hengmu was here for the treasure. Divine Wood King sought godhood. The old monk was a Tao guardian walking to protect the way. Each had a clear purpose. As for Jian Wushuang himself, he had no goals. He just wanted to leave this place now. Let them all fight it out. Danbao had a Tao guardian, so he didn't need protection. Wu Li even found a godfather. Although he didn't know why this godfather was a monk, he finally had a powerful backing. Instead, this time he didn't gain anything. But he had achieved his goal of coming to Wanlu in advance. Breaking through the tribulation realm and becoming the universe master was done in one go. That could be considered a profit. The old monk had said all that needed to be said and waved to remove the barrier. The elders of the ancient Wood sect, however, were clueless. They still thought these big shots were negotiating. Little did they know, as soon as the barrier disappeared, the old monk launched a fierce attack on Lord Hengmu. Even the nearby Divine Wood King was frightened. Lord Hengmu erupted one after another, but his divine power, even if restored to its peak, couldn't withstand the old monk's current strength. "Humph! I should have killed you long ago." The old monk snorted angrily, rising thousands of feet into the air. The light on his body enveloped the entire world. Zui Yehue and Yu Yenbai, by Lord Hengmu's side, hurriedly helped him resist the old monk's attacks. Jian Wushuang, to avoid being affected, quickly retreated. And Wu Li on the side was quick to follow suit, as were Blue and Danbao. The awakened Divine Wood King, on the other hand, looked at Danbao, then at the old monk. His mind was plotting something. The old monk, on his side, unilaterally suppressed the two great war beasts. The two great war beasts couldn't hold on at all. Lord Hengmu was also starting to panic, feeling very unsettled. He couldn't quite fathom why the old monk harbored such hatred towards him. The issue of enslavement, in truth, stemmed from personal animosity. Now that the old monk had become a guardian of the way, there was no need to kill him. Wait a minute, Lord Hengmu suddenly realized. There was a resonance between the mysterious treasure within Danbao and his own treasure. Just because a little kid couldn't notice it didn't mean that the Tao Guardian, the old monk, wouldn't know. With this in mind, he figured it out and shouted to the Divine Wood King. Divine Wood King, this big monk is after the treasure on me. If I die, you alone won't be a match for him. This statement woke up Divine Wood King. He was also after the treasure on Hengmu to embark on the path to godhood. After realizing this, a sly smile crept onto his face as he immediately charged towards Jian Wushuang and the others. The old monk paused momentarily on his side. His plan had been somewhat hasty. He had thought he could swiftly deal with Hengmu, but he had underestimated the two great war beasts. He had no choice but to come back to protect Danbao. But at that moment, a blur streaked across the sky, followed by the descent of a massive cosmic ship. What was just a blur moments ago became real instantly. Beneath the cosmos stood a colossal beast. Hum! Accompanied by the ancient toll of a bell, wild beast roars, and deafening thunder. Before Divine Wood King could make a move towards Jian Wushuang, a step away from reaching them, the old monk also halted. A formidable beast with an oppressive presence instantly launched an attack. With crimson skin and neat lines across its chest, emanating a terrifying divine power. In an instant, it stood before Jian Wushuang. At this moment, even Divine Wood King was stunned. But how could he retract the fist he had already thrown? He wanted to directly attack this mysterious intruder. His divine power erupted in that instant. Initially, he didn't need such immense divine power to deal with Jian Wushuang and the others, but facing the sudden appearance of the mysterious intruder, a trace of unease crept into his heart. So he unleashed his peak divine power. However, when his fist struck the face of the mysterious intruder, the latter remained unmoved. Divine Wood King was utterly dumbfounded. Get lost! A furious roar, and the mysterious intruder's aura exploded, directly sending Divine Wood King flying thousands of miles away. Even the hastily arriving old monk was pushed back. Deep down, they couldn't help but be shocked by the identity of the intruder. Just moments ago, through those exchanges, he roughly grasped the current situation in the ancient moon spacetime. Divine Wood King had already reached the peak of strength, surpassing even those mighty universe masters at the 8th Tribulation Realm. The prowess of a universe master lay in their native universe. At the 8th Tribulation Realm, they could bring their native universe along, gaining an additional battlefield. Their divine power would multiply. However, no matter how he looked, he couldn't discern the appearance of a battlefield here. Yet, with just one angry shout, the opponent managed to repel both him and Divine Wood King. Everyone present was utterly stunned, especially Wu Li, who had just been secretly pleased with how invincible his own father was. When he witnessed this scene, his face froze in shock. Even the Lord Hengmu, protected by two great battle beasts, stared fixedly at the cosmic ship above. He recognized this aura. Moreover, it was from an old acquaintance. But he never expected that this former acquaintance would have such a powerful ally. Initially, outside the Yongheng Kingdom, he only sensed the aura of an 8th Tribulation Realm. How did they become so strong now? Clearly, it surpassed the divine power of the 8th Tribulation Realm. Elder Blue, holding Danbao, was equally nervous. So much had happened in just one day. The Grand Elder fell. He and Danbao were forced into exile. Just as they had acquired a Tao Guardian, they had thought that peace would follow. But what followed was an even greater threat. Even if he had become a perfect dragon god warrior now, he couldn't catch his breath facing that figure. The intense oppression made it hard for even Elder Blue, let alone Jian Wushuang, to refrain from retreating. Their faces turned even paler. That figure had sharp, elongated spikes on its back. He couldn't forget. It's over. This time they really messed up big. They had momentarily forgotten the most troublesome person. Without even looking at the cosmic ship above, he knew it was Babidi who had come. Because that figure appeared here. Qi Zhouxiao, the Death Giant God Clan. Without any hesitation, he turned around to use the three-quake universe to prepare for escape, only to be blocked by another familiar figure. Hun Tian. Seeing Jian Wushuang's terrified gaze, Hun Tian sneered, Jian Wushuang, I used to envy you. But why are you so ignorant, daring to betray Lord Babidi? As soon as the words were out, a fist came crashing down. Jian Wushuang directly unleashed the super-eternal ancient transformation, his divine power exceeding 2 million. With both hands protecting his chest, he forcibly withstood the blow. Boom! Withstood it, but his divine body began to crack. Fortunately, he didn't need to conceal his life force, allowing him to rapidly recover as if no one else was around. TSK. The power of life, truly miraculous. After throwing a punch, Hun Tian did not strike again. Instead, he retreated, reaching the edge of the cosmic ship and bowing to the cabin door. Jian Wushuang grimaced. It seemed like the other party had developed an addiction to playing the role of a dog. Nevertheless, even in the worst-case scenario, Babidi wouldn't act against him. But he couldn't guarantee the same from others. While Babidi hadn't emerged yet, he intended to communicate with the old monk and divine wood king. But before he could transmit any message, the other party had already found him. Cooperation! 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 The three parties instantly reached an agreement. Then, they turned their gaze toward Lord Hengmu's direction. He nodded in agreement as well. Taking Danbao by the hand, he approached the old monk. Regardless of anything else, the old monk was Danbao's Dao guardian, and he was more inclined to trust him. Divine Wood King and Lord Hengmu, along with their followers, also joined them. Qi Juxiao paid no attention. His task was simply to stop the fighting. Buzz! The door of the cosmic ship's cabin opened. Swish! Swish! Several figures walked out of the cabin in perfect formation, then divided into two groups. They waited in silence for Babidi to make his appearance. They had really gone all out with their grandeur, leaving no room for anyone else to match. Seeing these people, the elders of the ancient wood faction couldn't hold themselves together. Each one was a familiar face, and as they sensed the aura emanating from them, their expressions stiffened even more. At the same time, Jian Wushuang and his group also noticed something unusual. Could it be that the secret technique has already been created? He found it hard to believe. If it had truly been created, then all the experts in the scattered tribulation realm would become Babidi's lapdogs. At the same time, he thought of Weiss's words, and those spoken by the old monk. The path to godhood. It seemed he wasn't the only one walking it. There was also Babidi. Hee. Even before the person emerged, a sinister laugh rang out. Following it, a thin, large-headed dwarf stepped out of the cabin. But beneath his feet floated a disc. No need to say more. It was none other than Babidi. There was even a golden light shimmering around him. It seemed to be some sort of divine power shield. Accompanying Babidi was the familiar Dylan. But the current Dylan, his divine aura wasn't weaker than that of Hun Tian. He had become Babidi's guinea pig, the first person on the road to resurrection. You could say he was a pioneer. I don't see anything special about this guy. The old monk glanced disdainfully at Babidi, but his wariness was mostly directed at Qi Juxiao. Jian Wushuang didn't hide anything from them and promptly explained the situation with Babidi. Lord Hengmu seemed aware of it and didn't seem too surprised. Although Divine Wood King had some knowledge, he was unaware of what happened before Babidi's revival of Qi Juxiao. He had initially thought the disappearance of the Yonghe kingdom was just a minor issue. He hadn't expected the emergence of such a figure. Resurrection. Divine Wood King was taken aback. Could someone really do such a thing? Wouldn't that mean becoming a god? Jian Wushuang regretted saying too much. He truly feared that Divine Wood King, for the sake of resurrection, would reignite his path of cultivation and join forces with Babidi against them. However, he underestimated Divine Wood King. Divine Wood King had probably considered such matters before. However, he lacked the broad-mindedness of Babidi. Resurrection was merely a thought for him, hoping to be resurrected and become a god. Everyone, it's better not to talk about this matter, or else we'll be enemies with all the scattered tribulation. Jian Wushuang reminded everyone in a low voice. The old monk exclaimed, "Isn't that too exaggerated? Resurrection is not so easy. Only after becoming a god can it be achieved. The aura of that Babidi is quite ordinary. He shouldn't be a god. It's not now. But it doesn't mean it won't be in the future. Lord Hengmu spoke up at this moment. Babidi's path is actually quite simple. He is walking the path of a demigod, intending to rely on faith to become a demigod. So he came up with the idea of resurrection. Jian Wushuang nodded inwardly, hearing some things he hadn't heard before. There was actually talk of demigods. But thinking about it, it made sense. Babidi lacked the power of life. It had nothing to do with the god of life. The god of life, mastering life, naturally could achieve resurrection. Now, there was no god of life in the northern spacetime, so the path of scattered tribulations was cut off. In this case, the path became clear. Divine Wood King was also pondering his own situation. If resurrection was related to the god of life, then it would be best for him to turn to Danbao now. Turning to him to compete for it seemed futile. Now there was a common enemy again. Qi Juxiao alone could defeat all of them. How could they compete in this situation? It would be better to follow the old monk, wait to secure Danbao and become a god, and then he could resume his cultivation path. But if he gave up his plan, he would only be able to slowly cultivate again. Lord Hengmu was already a special life form, not a universe master. Naturally, he didn't need to be resurrected. Him following along was just making trouble, but he couldn't bear to part with his treasures. His heart wavered, but if he joined forces with Babidi, he would have no way out. Babidi wouldn't help him, and his bargaining chip was not enough. For a moment, everyone harbored their own thoughts. Only Jian Wushuang felt very passive. He didn't know what use he had here. If these people needed his power of life to unlock the Wanlu, he would cooperate, and then give each of them a large amount of divine power, hoping to leave safely himself. But this idea was too naive. Babidi, surrounded by the crowd, came to the front of everyone, staring at them as if they were clowns, saying, "I'll give you two choices now, cooperate or die." This sentence was very familiar. It was similar to what Divine Wood King had said before, just a bit more domineering. "Who do you think you are?" The old monk's temper exploded. He couldn't listen anymore and directly retorted. Babidi frowned, and Qi Zhouxiao beside him immediately rushed over. The old monk's aura suddenly exploded, surpassing tens of millions of divine power, resisting Qi Zhouxiao. But after only persisting for a moment, he was smashed away by Qi Zhouxiao with a punch. Divine Wood King hurried forward to help. Now he couldn't just stand by and watch, they couldn't be picked off one by one. Lord Hengmu was the most cunning, letting Yu Yanbai go to help Divine Wood King and the old monk. He himself, with Zuyehue, wanted to sneak attack Babidi. At the same time, he also called Elder Blue. Elder Blue gave Jian Wushuang a glance, indicating to protect Danbao was enough. He directly transformed into his true dragon form, bursting out with over 2 million divine power, to attack Babidi. However, Jian Wushuang shook his head secretly. He had been keeping an eye on Babidi's divine power shield. To be able to stand in front of them like that, they must be extraordinary. Attempting to ambush Babidi wasn't so simple. Just the presence of the 8th Tribulation Realm powers like Hun Tian and Dylan posed a formidable challenge. Upon seeing Lord Hengmu leading the charge, Babidi remained unfazed and calmly said, "Step aside. Let him come." Lord Hengmu's and Elder Blue's divine powers were similar. Both were around 2 million. To Babidi with his shield, their attacks were like a nice massage. Zuyehue, with his top-notch 8th Tribulation Realm divine power, launched fierce attacks against the shield but received no response. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang had a premonition deep within. "It looks like it's up to me this time." With a flip of his palm, he produced a token and shouted, "Qi Zhouxiao, do you recognize this?" This token was given to him by Frelesa. It was useful whenever encountering the giant god clan. He didn't know if the controlled Qi Zhouxiao would recognize it. The moment he produced the token, Qi Zhouxiao paused his attack, startled. Neither Divine Wood King nor the old monk dared to seize the opportunity to attack, as they were both unable to shake Qi Zhouxiao. Following their gaze, they looked at Jian Wushuang. "Arg! At the sight of the token, Qi Juxiao's eyes burst open. Then he grabbed his head and let out a painful howl. There was a hint of consciousness tearing within him. The usually composed Babidi panicked at this sight. His biggest trump card was the publicly known Qi Juxiao. If Qi Juxiao had a problem, he would be finished. Qi Juxiao. Babidi disregarded everything and rushed towards Qi Juxiao. But the frenzied Qi Juxiao suddenly increased his aura, almost breaking through the ninth tribulation realm. Divine Wood King and the old monk both retreated. As Babidi rushed forward, Qi Juxiao casually waved his hand, sending him flying far away. Cracks appeared on Babidi's shield. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Babidi hastily shouted to Hun Tian and the others, "Go kill Jian Wushuang." Hun Tian and the others naturally didn't hesitate and immediately rushed over. But they were intercepted by Zhui Yehue alone. One person made Hun Tian and the others retreat. Useless, Babidi cursed angrily. At this moment, Divine Wood King and the old monk also turned around and charged towards Babidi. They also knew that if they killed Babidi, the threat of Qi Juxiao would be eliminated. Jian Wushuang noticed a flicker on the token as if it were erasing a mark. Not good. He hurriedly put away the token, but it was too late. Qi Juxiao completely erased his identity as a member of the giant god clan from the token. This wasn't because he was controlled by the token. It was because there was a karmic connection with the giant god clan above. He wanted to dissolve that karmic connection. Now that the karmic connection was dissolved, he wouldn't be restricted. Babidi's command had completely entered Qi Juxiao's consciousness. Kill everyone. Buzz. The sky instantly ruptured. Qi Juxiao grabbed Divine Wood King and the old monk directly. Jian Wushuang swallowed hard, thinking to himself, "Am I going to be beaten to death?" He felt like he was doomed. He had no cards left to play. There was no escape. Weiss. The last straw. On Tianqing Mountain in the Origin Source universe, Jian Wushuang's incarnation descended. Before he could speak, Weiss voiced his thoughts. "I won't lend a hand to anyone." A decisive refusal left Jian Wushuang utterly hopeless. There was no room for negotiation. Seeing Jian Wushuang's face turn pale, Weiss changed his tone, saying, "However, I can give you some advice. The candidate for the god of life beside you is your lifeline." "What do you mean?" Jian Wushuang hurriedly approached. "It's simple, just tell that Babidi. As long as he helps Danbao become the god of life, he can create a perfect path of resurrection. This is a normal thing in other spacetimes." Weiss said casually, but it puzzled Jian Wushuang. He didn't even believe what he was saying. How could Babidi believe it? And they still had to protect Danbao. Why not try it himself? "No, this old fox definitely won't believe what I say." Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly. Weiss remained silent and directly teleported him out. Jian Wushuang was speechless. This was his universe. But he was being teleported out like an outsider. However, as he was leaving, Weiss' voice sounded in his ear. "I will teleport you out before you die." This was like a quick-acting lifesaver. With this sentence, it was like his life was secured. He instantly felt relieved. But Weiss added another sentence afterwards. "My appearance fee is expensive. Helping you once means you need to fall a realm." This statement might not be believed by others, but Jian Wushuang was 100% sure it wasn't a joke. Just as he relaxed, he felt deflated again. However, at least he learned one thing from Weiss. That was, perhaps Danbao, as a candidate for godhood, could automatically initiate the power of resurrection. If he told this to Babidi, it would be a disaster. If Danbao became the god of life, he could embark on the path of resurrection. Then what would Babidi need to do? At that time, the clown would be Babidi. He could only find a breakthrough from another direction. Qi Juxiao, without any worries, was invincible. Even the old monk and Divine Wood King couldn't withstand him. But Babidi was excited. This was Qi Juxiao's first true move. Before, it had all been minor scuffles, not worthy of mention. But now, Qi Juxiao grew stronger with each battle. Even if an 8th Tribulation Universe Master came, it wouldn't matter. In the entire ancient moon spacetime, no one could stop his resurrection plan. Bab Edi. Lord Hengmu spoke up at this moment. Jian Wushuang paused, feeling that the other party might betray them and prepared to retreat at any moment. Hengmu, don't be anxious. Bab Edi grinned, remembering the sneak attack by Hengmu just now. Haha, I'm not in a hurry, but you might be in a hurry later. Lord Hengmu didn't show any weakness. Madness gleamed in his eyes. If they didn't fight now, they would really be doomed. Yu Yanbai had already been severely injured several times, then revived by Danbao and sent back into battle. Zui Yehue was the same. If they continued like this, they would die for sure. Seeing Lord Hengmu so confident, Bab Edi became interested, taunting, "Oh, it seems you still have some cards up your sleeve. Why not show them? Ignorant fool." Lord Hengmu's gaze was icy. He raised his left hand and reached straight for his own chest. This scene truly caught everyone off guard. Jian Wushuang was also startled. Hengmu, it's not necessary. Even if we die together, it's fine. There's no need for you to commit suicide. Such madness made Jian Wushuang feel a sense of desperation. He wanted to persuade him, but unexpectedly, Lord Hengmu revealed a shattered sphere from his chest. For heaven's sake, stop talking. Lord Hengmu was on the verge of tears. With one hand clutching the sphere and the other covering his wound, he gasped for breath, then turned to Danbao and said, "Kid, if you become the god of life in the future, remember the sacrifice I made for you today. You must grant me the position of Oracle, or else I'll take this treasure with me to my death." Oracle. Danbao didn't understand. Jian Wushuang was also unclear about this. But the fact that Lord Hengmu would do such a thing obviously indicated its significance. The old monk, who was struggling against Qijiushao, widened his eyes when he heard the word oracle. He understood this very well. The position of a god. But it wasn't just for one person. Dao Guardians could also follow the path of the gods and become a demigod. Simply put, it was like every man achieving immortality. Even his chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. If Danbao became the god of life, then the old monk, as the Dao Guardian, could become a demigod Dao Guardian. Below the Dao Guardian, there were other positions akin to messengers of the gods. However, these positions were limited and equally precious. Master, agree to his terms. The old monk didn't hesitate at this moment. Normally, he wouldn't share such benefits with these people without external threats. But now, with the interference of Bab Edi, the situation was different. Upon hearing the old monk's words, Danbao didn't know what to do. He could only make a solemn oath. After hearing Danbao's oath, Lord Hengmu was resolute and directly threw the treasure to Danbao. "Swallow it. This treasure is the key to your ascension to godhood," Lord Hengmu said, his heart bleeding as he uttered these words. This treasure was the opportunity for him to reach the 9th tribulation realm. But now he had to let it go. However, the position of Oracle wasn't bad either. Although it was living under someone else's roof, it was still a position. Many universe masters of the 8th tribulation realm didn't even have the qualifications to aspire to it. Moreover, he had observed Danbao's character. Following such a god of life, the future would also be quite free. After receiving the treasure, Danbao didn't hesitate. He directly swallowed it. The incomplete sphere crazily rotated within Danbao's body, and Danbao's innate power of all things immediately turned into the innate power of life. This powerful life force was even purer than Jian Wushuang's. Danbao's figure also instantly grew taller, and there was a sharpness between his eyebrows. Turning to look at the heavily injured old monk and divine wood king, he took out a dry wooden scepter from his sleeve, pointed it towards the sky, and exclaimed, "Holy Radiance Nebula!" Buzz! The world changed. Everyone felt a warmth enveloping them, except for Babiti's lackeys. Even the elders of the ancient wood sect felt a surge of powerful life force within them. This power not only restored their vitality but also temporarily boosted their combat power. Divine Wood King was in a situation similar to the old monk. Both had suffered heavy injuries, causing their divine powers to regress. However, beneath this nebula, their divine powers surged in an instant. Their combat capabilities also ascended to a new level. For a moment, they could actually rival the prowess of Qi Jiuxiao. "Is this the power of the god of life?" Divine Wood King exclaimed. Simultaneously, the treasure within him began to resonate. Recalling what Lord Hengmu had just done, he instantly understood. This treasure, or rather, it was a true divine treasure. It was the key to Ascension. This was something he already knew. But now, he understood that what didn't belong to him should not be his. With determination in his heart, he chose the old path of Lord Hengmu. He directly snatched the treasure obtained from Lord Hengmu and forcibly extracted it from his divine body. Danbao, this time it's up to you. Divine Wood King trusted Danbao even more, so he directly threw the treasure to him without any conditions. The position of Oracle. For him, it was actually a limited improvement. But resurrection, he was greatly interested in that. Cooperating with Babidi was like being a dog. But investing in Danbao was different. Not only could they form a bond, but they could also treat each other as equals. They could still distinguish between good and bad. Following Danbao, at least he could maintain his dignity from the past. For a strong individual, this was most important. Although Divine Wood King lost the treasure, his combat power did not decrease at all. The treasure was used to cultivate divine power. The enhancement of divine power was fundamental. The treasure was ultimately just one method of enhancement. After receiving the treasure thrown by Divine Wood King, Danbao's hands couldn't help but tremble. Jian Wushuang, who was watching on the side, felt a bit envious. A pure green beam of light soared into the sky. At this moment, Danbao illuminated the entire world. The source of life. Jian Wushuang stared fixedly at the core of origin source emanating from Danbao's body. Originally, Danbao didn't possess any origin source. But at this moment, the core of origin source had condensed within him. The treasure that Lord Hengmu had high hopes for, only when it merged with Danbao, could it be considered truly complete. Qi Jiuxiao, don't bother with those two trash. Kill this kid first. Babidi noticed something amiss. Coming from the starry sky, he had a deeper understanding of godhood and divinity. The radiant light of Buddha emanated from the old monk. His hands stretched out to directly block Qi Jiuxiao's path. A mortal body, comparable to a demigod. Yet acting as a dog for an ant like this truly shameful. The old monk taunted in an attempt to provoke Qi Jiuxiao and detain him. But Qi Jiuxiao wasn't buying it. With a punch that split the heavens, he sent the old monk, who was about to increase his divine power again, flying. Divine Wood King also attempted to intervene but was blasted away. They could withstand Qi Jiuxiao, but stopping him was nearly impossible. Watching Qi Jiuxiao about to charge towards Danbao, Elder Blue couldn't stand still, ready to transform into a true dragon and attack. However, Jian Wushuang stopped him. "You stay, I'll go." His gaze was determined, though the reason for this moment was unclear. But he had to step forward. Perhaps it was because of the words of the elder patriarch back then, or perhaps those said by the old monk. The path of godhood is not singular, but it demands singular dedication. Words and actions must be aligned to achieve unity of knowledge and action. Clang! Jian Wushuang stepped forward, effortlessly drew out the Wanjie sword, and faced the terrifying Qi Jiuxiao without a trace of fear. At this moment, the amplification on his body reached its peak. The origin source universe descended in an instant. The super-ancient eternal transformation also reached its pinnacle. His divine power soared to 2 million. The 100,000 black holes in the origin source universe simultaneously operated, elevating his origin source to its zenith. Life, death. Two terrifying sword intents reached their peaks and converged on the Wanjie sword. The Wanjie sword, from an unpredictable angle, merged these two powerful sword intents together. Instantly, an irreversible force was triggered. That force rotated, neither willing to yield to the other, each wanting to devour the other, but neither could defeat the other. This vortex instantly condensed onto the tip of the sword. Jian Wushuang's expression became even more ferocious. he still couldn't completely control this force even now. This was the true power of reincarnation. Starry Sky Chronicles. Third sword move. Reincarnation. Swish. This wasn't just a sharp and decisive sword technique. It was a dreadful destruction. Reincarnation was being constructed. Destruction was rising. As the Wuxia sword descended, it unleashed a huge vortex. Instantly, the surrounding area shifted, turning everything into a flat ground. This power directly reached the 8th tribulation realm. Qi Zhouxiao, who rushed over, reached out to stop it, but couldn't intervene in this vortex. His figure plunged directly into it. "What is this?" Divine Wood King exclaimed in shock. The power of life was already precious enough. But another force, it turned out to be death. Life is precious. But what about death? If life is the vitality of the tribulation realm, the pinnacle of all things, then death is the end of all things, the collision of beginnings and endings, the power condensed from it. It's not just a simple equivalence. The power reversed by both sides is enough to deter all 8th tribulation experts. Divine Wood King's gaze flickered, looking at Jian Wushuang. In addition to amazement, there was astonishment in his heart. There's also a bit of luck. Fortunately, he and Jian Wushuang are now in a cooperative relationship. Otherwise, this move would have fallen on his head. The old monk is different from Divine Wood King. When he saw this power, the first thing he thought of was reincarnation. Because he knows the god of life better. He thought of a godly position one level higher than the god of life. Reincarnation. If Jian Wushuang mastered reincarnation, then it would be just like what Weiss said. God is not singular, Jian Wushuang still has hope. This is the best proof. One sword, reincarnation, from giving life to causing death. All under this one sword. Qi Zhouxiao at the center of the vortex was completely trapped. Life and death, both turned into sword shadows, constantly swirling around Qi Zhouxiao. No matter how Qi Zhouxiao tried to destroy the attack, he couldn't break free. When Babidi saw this, he was completely stunned. Not because Qi Zhouxiao was trapped, but surprised that Jian Wushuang had not yet mastered the power of death, but had already developed the power of reincarnation. In fact, this power of reincarnation is not pure. Because now Jian Wushuang's power of life is too powerful, the death power condensed afterwards is weak, and very weak. To gather into the power of reincarnation, the two powers must be unified. Simply put, it's the fusion of similar powers. If one side is strong and the other is weak, then it will fail. If Jian Wushuang's power of death is as strong as the power of life, then his display of the reincarnation sword, even the gods would have to bow down, let alone Qi Zhouxiao. But that's a long way off. At least it's not solvable now. Jian Wushuang, have you devoured Mieshang? Babidi asked incredulously. In his opinion, only by devouring Mieshang could one condense reincarnation. At this moment, Jian Wushuang didn't even have time to catch his breath. There was no time to explain this to Babidi. With this sword move, he forcibly increased its power. If it weren't for the strength of the source, he would have long exhausted himself and perished. Fortunately, the sacred radiance nebula of Danbao had been shining upon him, enabling him to hold on until now. How much longer? Danbao. He gritted his teeth, turning to look at Danbao. The other party was still condensing the source of life. But he was running out of time. This sword move couldn't kill Qi Zhouxiao. He could only trap the other party first. For Jian Wushuang, who perhaps had limited strength, even trapping was proving to be quite difficult. Benefactor, just let him come. Danbao held the scepter, his expression calm, without a hint of fear. As if at this moment he had truly become the god of life. Seeing Danbao so calm, Jian Wushuang naturally didn't want to force it. But it was a good opportunity to truly condense the reincarnation sword. Let's see how powerful it is. He controlled two sword shadows with his qi and forcefully merged them together. The vortex disappeared at this moment. Qi Zhouxiao also charged over fiercely. But this time he wouldn't be facing the vortex. Instead, it would be a real reincarnation sword. The reincarnation in the vortex was just some debris. This was the real Reincarnation sword. A huge sword shadow confronted Qi Jiuxiao. Its power could even kill someone in the 8th Tribulation realm. Divine Wood King and the old monk both felt a chill. But Qi Jiuxiao just raised his hand to block, intending to shake off the Reincarnation sword. With just this block, his arm was shattered. Ah! Qi Jiuxiao was stunned. This was the first time he had been injured. Then he became serious. He directly grasped the Reincarnation sword with both hands. Divine power erupted, forcibly blocking the Reincarnation sword. Ah! A roar shook the heavens. The 7th Tribulation realm powerhouses who were still on their way were all suppressed. They all looked towards the Wanlu divine realm. Countless powerhouses from the 9 heavens and 10 lands heard this roar. In the Black Heaven, several 8th Tribulation realm experts came out, sensing the disturbance from the ancient Wood continent. I've sent a message to Divine Wood King, but there's been no response. It seems something has happened in Wanlu. TSK, Wanlu is involved in a big way. I have to go and see. I've been in seclusion for so long. It's just right to go out for a stroll. Night Owl King, are you going personally? The highest of the 9 heavens. White Heaven, the headquarters of the ancient Moon Divine sect. After feeling the disturbance from the ancient Wood continent, the current pope of the ancient Moon Divine sect also emerged from seclusion. This generation's pope was a woman. Her beauty was not extraordinary. Her demeanor lacked the majesty of an emperor. But there was an extraordinary aura about her. She slowly walked towards the peak of the ancient Moon Divine mountain, looking up at the ancient Wood continent. Her eyes filled with a hint of melancholy. What she saw was not Wanlu, but a terrifying existence that was slowly growing. Who exactly is shrouding the ancient Wood continent? The Pope of the ancient Moon shook her head with a sigh, unable to see through even as an 8th Tribulation Universe Master. She was a genuine 8th Tribulation Universe Master. Almost an invincible existence in the ancient Moon spacetime. Even she couldn't see through it. If outsiders knew, it would surely cause panic. The tremors within the 9 heavens had alarmed many old folks. The same was true within the 10 lands. The ancient Moon ruins. Even Hu Qing, in the core area, felt the terrifying aura rising, feeling unsettled. Ah, Brother Wushuang, we really shouldn't have come here in the first place. Hu Qing shook his head, playing with the Buddhist beads in his hand. It could be seen that he had not yet reached the Tribulation realm. He was still an emperor. Not only did he not grow, but he also seemed to have weakened considerably. The whole person looked somewhat haggard. The ancient Moon spacetime, one of the top 3 terrifying ruins. The Wuhua secret realm. Here, someone also noticed the situation in the ancient Wood continent. He squinted towards the direction of the ancient Wood continent, feeling a hint of unease. And behind him, there was a man in a yellow robe and tall hat, drinking heavily and casually asking, "Realm King, you old bat, after my seclusion this time, is there anything new happening in the outside world? Like how's my old friend Wushuang doing?" North Realm King. If the strong in the ancient Moon spacetime knew about it, they would probably be shocked. That man in the yellow robe and tall hat actually called him Realm King. Hee, your little old friend of yours isn't doing well now, and there's a terrifying existence appearing in the ancient Wood continent. This terrifying existence is continuously growing in divine power and will be a threat to the entire ancient Moon spacetime in the future. You kids should hurry up and cultivate. When you're done, we have to leave the ancient Moon spacetime. The man in the yellow robe and tall hat paused for a moment, furrowing his brow as he said, "How terrifying is it? Can it defeat someone at the 7th Tribulation realm? Too small-minded. Surpassing the 9th Tribulation as a Realm King. When I say terrifying, how strong do you think he'll be?" Realm King felt somewhat speechless, thinking he had taken on an ignorant disciple who understood nothing. And this disciple was none other than Wuxia, who had come from the Qishan Temple. Having entered the ancient Moon spacetime, he had been trapped in the Wuhua secret realm. Later, he came into contact with Realm King and quickly became a universe master. Inside the spiritual time house constructed by the Realm King, he had cultivated for 1,000,000 epochs in one go, and now he was almost at the level of a 5th Tribulation Universe Master. Apart from Jian Wushuang, he was the fastest cultivator among the 10 this time, and his luck was top-notch. Although Jian Wushuang cultivated faster, but it was at the cost of his life. Wu Zhuo followed Realm King, either cultivating in seclusion or going hunting with him. It was all fun and games. Before they knew it, he had reached the 5th Tribulation Realm. You're just boasting. Last time, you couldn't even handle a wild beast at the level of the 5th Tribulation Realm. I had to step in. Wu Zhuo was short-haired and lacked experience, completely disregarding Realm King. He thought the other party was just a true spirit, or perhaps the consciousness left behind by a fallen strong individual, without any combat power. Although they had a master-disciple relationship, the two of them had no airs about them and would often banter with each other. Humph. That's because I didn't go all out. Realm King blushed with embarrassment, feeling displeased at being exposed. At that moment, all the powerhouses in the ancient moon spacetime turned their gaze towards the ancient wood continent. Many powerhouses had already begun to move, wanting to explore the ancient wood continent. However, the aura they sensed was not coming from Qi Zhouxiao, nor from Jian Wushuang and the others. Could even be said that it wasn't within the Wanlu divine realm, but in the 16 kingdoms of Qingqiao, within the borders of Yu Kingdom, an uninhabited land for thousands of miles. Not a single cultivator within billions of miles. It became a deserted city. And also in the Shi Kingdom, after the Patriarch of Shi Kingdom made a move, there were few powerhouses left in the Shi Kingdom. There was only one dying at the 7th Tribulation Realm. That dying 7th Tribulation Realm powerhouse had now completely perished. Stepping on the body of this 7th Tribulation Realm powerhouse, a monster was continuously growing. Except for Daughter Kingdom, where Queen Yunji was present, none of the 16 kingdoms were spared. Hee. It's time to go to the secret realm, because he could feel countless eyes watching him, all coming for him, but it would still take some time for them to arrive. Before leaving the 16 kingdoms of Qingqiao, the monster shed a heavy shell. Its appearance also underwent a complete transformation. In the divine realm of Wanlu, Jian Wushuang's reincarnation sword once again intercepted Qi Zhouxiao's attack. However, due to the subsequent lack of origin, it was eventually securely received by Qi Zhouxiao. The objective had been achieved, leaving the rest to Danbao. Jian Wushuang, who had retreated behind the others, looked towards Danbao. He was also curious about how powerful Danbao had become. He also wanted to see the might of the gods. The only god he had seen so far was Weiss. Back when he was crossing the tribulation, Weiss's 2 hands had stunned him. If Danbao had that kind of ability, he could truly walk unhindered. Qi Zhouxiao took a large step forward, his hand forming a claw as he reached for Danbao. Everyone retreated, waiting silently for Danbao to make his move. Buzz! Before the giant claw could touch Danbao, it was blocked by a shield formed by a green origin source. Securely received the claw. Back! Danbao waved his hand, his scepter pointing directly at Qi Zhouxiao. The latter actually took a step back, but then he attacked again. His sharp claws relentlessly hammered against the shield. Babidi in the distance was furious. He had thought that with Qi Zhouxiao's arrival, everything could be resolved. He didn't expect to be stopped by a mere child. Never mind him. Go kill the others. Babidi had to shift his attention again. Qi Zhouxiao, who had received the command, did not hesitate at all. He turned and charged towards Jian Wushuang. This frightened Jian Wushuang, who hurriedly tried to evade. But at that moment, Danbao's shield expanded directly, enveloping them all. Qi Zhouxiao once again encountered the shield. Can it really be like this? Jian Wushuang looked up at the shield. A shield that could withstand Qi Zhouxiao. Wouldn't that make it invincible? Even when an 8th Tribulation Universe Master arrived, there was nothing they could do. The old monk was also excited, loudly proclaiming, "Rest assured, everyone. The young master has already grasped the path to godhood. As long as he enters the Wanlu divine realm again, he will truly ascend to the position of God." Hearing this, Elder Blue was very pleased. This time, their Palunga clan could truly exist eternally. They no longer needed to rely on the protection of others. Divine Wood King and Lord Hengmu, however, felt a mix of emotions. The former was envious. The latter was apprehensive. Envious that the other could ascend to godhood. Jealous of why they couldn't. Fortunately, both could reap corresponding benefits. Although Lord Hengmu felt jealousy, he had never intended to ascend to godhood in the first place, and certainly did not want to see others ascend. His original pursuit was the 9th tribulation realm. With the treasure for refining pills, he had the opportunity to reach the 9th tribulation realm. Now that the treasure was gone, but he had gained the position of an oracle, it wasn't bad either. Could barely be considered not a loss. It's just that his mood was somewhat gloomy. Seeing others becoming powerful was harder to bear than dying for oneself. Especially Danbao, that little brat. Compared to Lord Hengmu, Divine Wood King's ambition was much greater. God of life. That was the god of life of the northern spacetime. The life of the 9 great spacetimes belonged to Danbao's jurisdiction. Even if he didn't get to be an oracle or whatever, he could still break away from the ancient moon temple with Danbao's relationship. Leaving the sect, he could still have a chance at reincarnation. And the chance was almost a certainty. He was quite happy. The most uncomfortable person on the field was undoubtedly Babidi, who also sought godhood. But not as a true god, but as a demigod. Only mastering the secret method of reincarnation. He didn't care about the position of god of life. With the method of reincarnation, he could indirectly control all scattered tribulation cultivators. Wouldn't he become the ruler of the 9 great spacetimes? Damn it! Babidi gritted his teeth. But he was helpless. Present, he was already behind. Even if he entered the Wanlu Divine Wood and ascended the Divine Staircase, he still couldn't compare to Danbao. But now he was already on the stove, he had to move forward, with no way out. And this path was not one he could choose to walk. Now, the initiative was completely in Danbao's hands. All because of that treasure. The green sphere on the scepter. Danbao looked down on all beings, calmly saying, "I have no desire to contend, but the great way presses upon me. Since that's the case, let's enter the Wanlu and ascend the Divine Staircase." The old monk took the lead, saying loudly, "Very well, we are willing to follow our master for eternity." Divine Wood King and Lord Hengmu quickly bowed. Wu Li even knelt down directly. Jian Wushuang shook his head, silently acknowledging that they were indeed family. He didn't express anything. Becoming a god had nothing to do with him. Right now, he just wanted to leave. With so many people protecting Danbao, he wasn't needed anymore. It would be better to leave and find Wu Zua or Jin Wuyang. Just as he was about to take advantage of the situation to leave, Weiss stopped him again. Leaving now would be the most foolish thing to do. You don't need to do anything to enter Wanlu. You can witness the arrival of a god, and most importantly, you can receive the blessing of the gods. That's crucial. There will also be some special treasures bestowed upon you. You have a good relationship with this little guy. You shouldn't waste it. Weiss's words left him stunned. The blessing of the gods. And special treasures too. He wasn't sure about that. But if even Weiss said they were special treasures, then they must be valuable. But lying down and winning, he really couldn't bring himself to do such a thing. Besides, he didn't lack treasures now. With the bones of Dong Jun in his possession, he could still improve. If he needed treasures, he would go and get them himself. What was the point of following others? If he hadn't become the universe master, pressured by the threat of extinction, he might have done so. But now, he was already a 6th tribulation universe master. There was no need to do such things anymore. He had plenty of time to do other things to improve his strength. No need. I have my own path to walk. Weiss looked surprised but then decided not to dissuade him. He said calmly, "I didn't expect you to be so resolute. Since that's the case, do me a favor. In Wanlu, help me find something. After it's done, I'll give you the first half of the utmost freedom intent technique." Utmost freedom intent technique. Jian Wushuang widened his eyes in disbelief and asked, "Aren't I supposed to challenge the 9 tribulations tower? How can you just give it away?" Hee hee, I'm a god. There's nothing I can't do. Weiss chuckled, covering his mouth. Since you're already a god, why do you still need treasures from Wanlu? This question actually stumped Weiss. After thinking for a moment, he honestly replied, It's not that I need that treasure. It's this cat of mine that needs it. After speaking, he reached down and touched the purple kitten in his arms. What the heck? Jian Wushuang couldn't quite understand. What kind of god was Weiss? Not only could he change the highest law rules, but he also sent him to Wanlu to find treasures for a cat. The purple kitten was quite small, with no aura around it. But he could be sure that this cat wasn't a god. It might just be an ordinary cat with purple skin, and it didn't even have fur. This cat is the first life purified from your universe. Helping it is equivalent to helping yourself. If you put it that way, doesn't it mean I'm taking advantage of you? Although Jian Wushuang maintained a tough exterior, upon hearing that the cat was a life form from his own universe, there was a flicker of joy in his heart, even though his universe was currently being toyed with by Weiss. But Weiss was a god, and whatever games he played would ultimately benefit Jian Wushuang. As for whether or not to go to Wanlu, he was still somewhat conflicted. Glancing at Danbao, he seemed to see a reflection of Hu Qing in the other's innocent eyes. Their personalities were quite similar. Kind, innocent, and not inclined towards conflict. Such people becoming gods, Jian Wushuang could somewhat accept. However, if he were to enter Wanlu now, not only would he miss out on opportunities, but he might also become a burden. The strongest individuals entering Wanlu at the moment were all at least at the 7th Tribulation Realm. Including Wu Li, the 6th Tribulation Universe Master, Jian Wushuang was barely ranked second to last. Of course, in terms of actual combat power, he might be able to compete within the top 10. But he couldn't sway the course of battle. There might even be major battles once inside. What would he do then? Just as he was deliberating, Elder Blue approached. Benefactor, given the current situation, what are your plans? Blue surveyed the surroundings as he arrived. He felt that both Divine Wood King and Lord Hangmu were not good people. He wasn't entirely trusting of the sudden appearance of the monk either. In the end, he came to Jian Wushuang seeking advice. This made Jian Wushuang quite pleased, and he made a decision in his heart right away. He would go. He must go in. Since others were giving him face like this, he might as well make a trip. Even if he couldn't help much, offering suggestions would suffice. Sometimes, strategy was more effective than strength. Back then, helping Zhenling taking care of Xinling for Lesa, wasn't it all thanks to his strategy? Perhaps entering Wanlu wouldn't be about fighting, but about social etiquette. Danbao eased his posture and also moved closer to Jian Wushuang. The others seeing this also gathered around. Jian Wushuang swallowed his saliva, scanned the group, then spoke up. Since Danbao can open Wanlu, let's pay a visit. But what about Babidi? Will he keep tagging along? Currently, he was quite concerned about Babidi. Even though Danbao could hold back Qi Zhouxiao, he was only a shield, not true combat power. He had a bad feeling about this. It would be best to shake off Babidi, then enter Wanlu. Don't worry about that. In Wanlu, strength doesn't determine everything. That Babidi, even if he brings people along, it doesn't matter. After all, they don't have the treasures to open the path to godhood, so entering Wanlu won't hinder us. The old monk was most familiar with Wanlu, so he promptly dispelled Babidi's threat. Jian Wushuang nodded, then continued. Since that's the case, let's go in. But let's make it clear beforehand. Since we're all in the same boat, we should establish an oath. It's beneficial for everyone. I agree. Lord Hangmu was the first to step forward. He was the first to defect, willing to give up his own treasures. He gave them to Danbao, only asking for a position as a divine messenger. I agree too. Soon, those with Divine Wood King also began to give orders to swear oaths. Becoming a god now seemed hopeless, and Divine Wood King only wanted to master the secret of resurrection. To reignite the path of cultivation. That was what he needed most at the moment. On the side of the old monk, the oath had been made early on, so naturally, there were no issues. Except for Wu Li, everyone else swore oaths. Cough, I also... Before Wu Li could speak, he was interrupted. Obviously, the others didn't take him seriously. The old monk casually embraced Wu Li and comforted him. Old boy, you're our lucky star. You don't need to swear an oath. But there are still benefits. I'm most familiar with Wanlu, and there's a treasure inside that can help you reach the 7th tribulation realm. After our young master succeeds, I'll get one for you. By then, when you reach the 7th tribulation realm, I'll find a way to arrange a divine position for you. After those elders from the ancient Wood sect finished speaking, they all cast admiring glances towards him. Wu Li was especially excited. In this holy gathering, he was the greatest success story. It was all his doing. From the 3rd tribulation realm, he had climbed all the way to the 6th tribulation realm. And he even acknowledged a new father, one who was a peak expert at the 8th tribulation realm. Now, he even earned himself the title of the future god of life. From now on, he thought it would be difficult to die. Since everything is settled, let's go in. All right, everyone nodded. Danbao's eyes were resolute, as if he felt bestowed with a great responsibility, and his tone was somewhat solemn. We will rely on all of you this time. It's nothing. No problem. They're our own people. Unlike this side, Babidi was almost furious. Although Qi Jiuxiao had destroyed everything, he didn't have a part in the path to godhood. Reincarnation's secret technique. Babidi gritted his teeth, his eyes showing signs of fear. I swear I won't retreat. If I follow them, I won't believe it. However, his words didn't cause any discomfort on Jian Wushuang's side. Instead, they treated Babidi as if he were air. Danbao waved his scepter, and a map appeared in front of them. Enter through the entrance of Wanlu. It's right. Everyone looked at the red entrance according to the map. Jian Wushuang exclaimed, Infinite Great World? The entrance to Wanlu was actually in the Infinite Great World. This was indeed surprising. After running around, it turned out to be right where they entered, at the bottom of the Roman River in the Infinite Great World. It was the same blessed place where Wu Li had went into seclusion. Heavens! Lord Hengmu's eyes almost popped out. The entrance to the Wanlu Divine Wood was right in front of him, and he actually missed it. For a moment there were mixed feelings. Simultaneously, there was immense regret. Finally, they fell into calmness. Everything was destined by fate. Although surprised, nothing was impossible. Let's go. Danbao led the way, a green protective shield always enveloping them. They weren't afraid of being attacked by Qi Jiuxiao, so they proceeded to the Infinite Great World in a grand manner. On the way, they didn't encounter any wild beasts, let alone savage beasts. After leaving the Wanlu Divine Domain, they entered the Infinite Great World. By now, those external 7th Tribulation Realm experts had just arrived here. It happened to meet Jian Wushuang and the others head-on. The newcomers weren't strangers. They were familiar faces to Jian Wushuang, disciples of the Lianxing. Seeing each other, he also understood their intentions. They casually explained that the more people, the better, according to the old monk. Anyway, in the Wanlu Divine Wood, it didn't matter how many people entered, as long as they didn't oppose them. Otherwise, these people joining Babidi would be trouble. After casually explaining the reason to Lianxing, they naturally agreed. One by one, they made vows never to betray. Danbao was also generous, directly pouring out the power of life to help those scattered tribulation experts in the 7th tribulation, instantly restoring them to their peak. This scene made them even more convinced. Resurrection was right in front of them. Just as they helped these people restore their combat power, the Lord of the Celestial Wolves, who had been following Lianxing and the others all the way, also arrived. TSK, you really found us. The Lord of the Celestial Wolves' face sank. Then his gaze fell on Jian Wushuang. But when he saw the strong ones behind Jian Wushuang, his eyeballs almost fell to the ground. Forget about Divine Wood King. The 8th Tribulation powerhouse was known to all. But there were also Zui Yehui, Yu Yanbai, and the old monk. 2 top 8th Tribulation realm powerhouses, plus 1 at the pinnacle of the 8th Tribulation. Among the 7th Tribulation disasters that the Lord of the Celestial Wolves had brought, The strongest was only at the pinnacle of the seventh tribulation. There were only 20 or so people, and half of them were scattered tribulation cultivators. Originally, they were full of morale, but when they saw the strong ones behind Jian Wushuang, they all shrank their necks and dared not approach. Only the Lord of the Celestial Wolves stood at the forefront alone. Jian Wushuang frowned and stepped forward. "Celestial Wolf, I heard you were looking for me?" There was some doubt in his tone, and the old monk and Divine Wood King also sensed that the visitor was unfriendly. So they stepped forward and stared with wide eyes. Now, whoever dared to stand in front of them would die. No one could stop them. Even if Qi Juxiao came, it wouldn't work. A mere celestial wolf dared to act rashly. The Lord of the Celestial Wolves was momentarily speechless. He didn't know what to do. Looking left and right, it seemed like he was looking for a life-saving straw. At that moment, a streak of light approached from the distance. It was the sect leader of the ancient Wood sect, Jiang Mention. Seeing Jiang Mention was like grabbing a lifeline for the Lord of the Celestial Wolves. He hastily pointed at Jiang Mention and said, "It's him! He's the one who let us in to find Jian Wushuang." Jiang Mention was taken aback, but he didn't care about these accusations at the moment, because Babidi had also followed. "Celestial Wolf, are you looking for death?" Jiang Mention flashed to Babidi's side. At that moment, the Lord of the Celestial Wolves realized that everyone else had backers. He was the only one without any. Babidi didn't even spare him a glance. Right now, he only wanted to follow Danbao and enter the Wanlu. Seeing someone blocking their way ahead, they didn't bother to recruit them, just waved casually. There was no need for Qi Juxiao to fight. With just one move from Hun Tian, they instantly broke through. Grabbing the Lord of the Celestial Wolves by the neck, he reverted him back to his original form. What was thought to be a majestic celestial wolf turned out to be nothing more than a dog, silenced by the grip on its neck. "Let's go!" Jian Wushuang shook his head and glanced at Divine Wood King. Divine Wood King's expression was obviously troubled. His sect leader, Jiang Mention, turned out to be a traitor. If it weren't for other pressing matters, he would have had to deal with him. In fact, a seventh tribulation realm wasn't much at this point. Couldn't change the course of the battle, just a matter of face. Seeing Jian Wushuang and the others continuing towards the infinite great world, Babidi followed suit. As for those scattered seventh tribulation realm experts in the secret realms, they were already dispersed and idle where they stood. Babidi also understood that these seventh tribulation realms were useless. Carrying them would only be a burden. That was the difference. Danbao didn't hesitate and brought along Lianxing and the others. The god of life. All the same, the Roman River. They arrived in almost a quarter of an hour. Yet when Jian Wushuang first traveled from here to the Dragon God continent, it took hundreds of years. Struggling at the bottom of the Roman River for a long time, even shedding blood and tears. Fighting all the way, now returning to this place. There couldn't help but be a long sigh in their hearts. Thinking back to when they first entered, those people, those things. Looking back now, only Wu Li remained. Most of the others had fallen. Li Shang was lucky, probably already out of the infinite great world by now. At the gathering point on the outskirts, there were teleportation arrays to leave. There was also Empress Fengqian. Although she couldn't enter the Wanlu like them, she had preserved her life, and her strength had improved. It was already the best outcome. Further down the road, it would likely mean death. And these two individuals, they've both slaughtered members of the Palunga clan. Not causing trouble for them is already giving them face. "I'll lead the way." Jian Wushuang took the initiative to dive down, leading the group directly into that familiar deep trench. From above, it appeared as a deep trench. Standing below, it resembled a mountain range. Splash! Against the rushing water, they moved upstream. In just a moment, they arrived at the same blessed land as before. However, unlike in the past, this blessed land had turned into an arena. When they arrived, there were still savage beasts battling. However, there were no familiar faces from before. When Jian Wushuang and the others left, news of this place spread. TMU King and several other experts at the Fifth Tribulation Realm fell here. This matter also spread strangely. It was said that there was treasure inside. This attracted the attention of many Fifth Tribulation Realm experts. One after another, they entered this place. What followed was inevitably a fierce battle. By the time they arrived, a deep layer of bones had formed in this place. Crack, casually trampled upon. Jian Wushuang glanced around indifferently and said, "Wu Li, it's up to you." "No problem. I'll handle it." With a step forward, Wu Li made the earth tremble. The savage beasts still struggling in this place suddenly awakened. They also sensed Wu Li's aura, a breath of millions of divine power. This breath directly frightened many savage beasts in this place into retreat. Those who couldn't retreat in time were instantly cut into pieces by the sword aura emanating from Wu Li's body. This kind of thing definitely couldn't be done by Danbao. He was going to become a god of life. He couldn't dirty his hands. It had to be done by those below. Like Wu Li, Jian Wushuang couldn't do it either, because he himself had mastered the power of life and couldn't continue to act so recklessly. Wu Li was the most suitable for the task. After clearing out the riffraff, Jian Wushuang raised his hand and condensed his breath, directly evaporating the river water within tens of thousands of miles around, creating a powerful barrier. With Danbao leading the others, they finally stepped forward. This is the place. Looking at the desolate bone paradise ahead, Danbao's eyes gleamed with a hint of light. Holy radiance! The scepter pointed directly at the heart of the paradise. A green aura suddenly burst open. An ancient aura erupted from within. The entire Roman river trembled. The unlocking of the Wanlu was at this moment. Green light penetrated the stone wall, bursting open, and the position emitting the ancient aura was the entrance. In front of everyone, the ground began to crack. The scattered triangulation, along with Jian Wu and Danbao, felt it most keenly. From the cracks in the ground emanated the power of life. This was the place they were looking for, the source of life force, the true innate origin source universe of life, the entrance to the Wanlu universe. It was also their ultimate goal. The path to godhood, the stairway of gods. It's all inside. Let's go. Danbao took the lead. He entered the crack first. The others didn't dare to hesitate and followed suit. Jian Wushuang stayed behind. After everyone entered, he looked back at the outside world. In the distant sea, a crimson light appeared. Babidi had brought Qi Jiuxiao here. Looking back at the crack again, he felt somewhat trance-like. This time, everything seemed so unreal. From entering the ancient moon spacetime to now, felt like a cycle. Entering the ancient moon spacetime, hearing about the sacred assembly and Wanlu. Until now, the span was long, but it was also fast. Finally, we're in. With a flicker of his figure, he followed suit, entering deeper into the crack, searching for the source of life. There was a huge formation there. At the core of the formation was a tree root. Naturally, the tree root was the root of the Wanlu divine tree. From the riverbed to the formation, there were at least billions of miles, plus the depth of the Roman River. You can imagine how deep this place is, but the Wanlu divine realm is even more remote. Yet the roots of the divine tree could spread here. Looking from above the ancient wood continent, any secret universe could be seen. Only a willow tree could be seen. This willow tree absorbed the essence of the entire ancient wood continent. It was also the origin of the ancient wood continent. The existence of this continent was all thanks to a willow tree. Enter the formation. Once everyone gathered, Danbao directly activated the formation using the life force from his scepter. In the instant the formation activated, Babidi arrived with his people, albeit a bit late. Unfortunately, they missed the formation. However, that didn't mean they couldn't enter, as Danbao's actions just now caught Babidi's attention completely. Life force. This was something he had in abundance. After the formation disappeared, another formation descended. Babidi led his people into the formation. Just like Danbao, he used his life force to activate it. Whoosh! 90% of the strong individuals on the ancient wood continent vanished in an instant. This sent shockwaves through the outside world, especially among those strong individuals who were relatively close to the ancient Wood continent. They were rushing over the Wanlu Willow Divine Tree, or rather the Wanlu universe. In the moment of entering the universe, everyone felt a warm surge of life. This warmth enveloped their bodies, making them incredibly comfortable, as if wrapped in a warm current. If they looked from another angle, they would be surprised to find that they were indeed wrapped up. Danbao and Jian Wushuang both wielded the power of life. They regained consciousness the quickest. Upon opening their eyes, they were startled by the scene before them. Dozens of vines interconnected like blood vessels, crisscrossing each other. As for them, they were enveloped in a thin, white membrane, their bodies immersed in a green liquid. Jian Wushuang first checked his divine power and, finding no issues, breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, his divine power was rapidly increasing. This green liquid wasn't just simple life power. It was life divine power. Unbeknownst to him, he had gained over 10,000 divine power. If he absorbed all of this liquid, he might gain up to 100,000. While unconscious, absorption was passive, but after regaining consciousness, actively absorbing it was much faster. Coupled with his devouring ability, in just a short while he absorbed all the green liquid. It turned out to be even more powerful than he had anticipated. After absorption, his divine power increased from 1 million to 1.15 million. Why haven't you absorbed it? Turning his head, Jian Wushuang saw that Danbao had already broken through the membrane and was holding a bag of green liquid in his hand. Danbao smiled bitterly, explaining, "It seems I can't absorb it, and I'm not the fighting type of Palunga. So, this life divine power is useless to me. Well, that's a bit of a waste." He swallowed a mouthful of saliva, indeed feeling regretful. But his gaze remained fixed on the bag of green life divine power in Danbao's hand. "Since you can absorb it, take it." Danbao was usually taciturn, but his mind was sharp. How could he not understand Jian Wushuang's intention? Since it was of no use to him, Jian Wushuang decided to give it to someone who could make use of it. Jian Wushuang politely declined Danbao's offer, then proceeded to absorb the bag of divine life power. The divine power surged, reaching an astonishing 1.2 million. Just as he entered the life universe of the Wanlu Willow Divine Tree, an opportunity presented itself. This advancement granted him a direct increase of 200,000 divine power. Moreover, whether it was cultivating divine power or absorbing treasures that contained it, the speed was considerably faster in this place. Observing that the other powerful beings around had not yet awakened, Jian Wushuang didn't mind. He took out the remaining bones of Dongjun and began absorbing them with all his might. With 1 million basic divine power, he increased it by another 200,000. Additionally, he absorbed the surplus divine life power that Danbao didn't need, which contributed to this increase. For a powerhouse with a basic divine power of 2 million, the increase might only be less than 1,000. Figures like Divine Wood King and the Old Monk, both pinnacle 8th Tribulation Realm powerhouses, had over 10 million divine power, so their increases were even less. But for Jian Wushuang and Wu Li, this was a stroke of luck. There was still a large portion of Dongjun's bones left. It took him a full hour to absorb them. In the outside world, it might have taken a day. But here he saved 10 times the time, and his divine power had now reached 1.5 million. With a basic divine power of 1.5 million, it doubled to 3 million in the state of the super-eternal ancient transformation, reaching the threshold of the 8th Tribulation Realm. His strength was comparable to that of Hun Tian, though his realm was at the bottom of the field. Being only at the 6th Tribulation Realm, his combat power was unquestionably within the top 5. Naturally, the first was the Old Monk, followed by Divine Wood King. The remaining two were Zui Yehui and Yu Yanbai, two top-notch 8th Tribulation Realm powerhouses. Their divine power exceeded 8 million, making them the top of the 8th Tribulation Realm. Beyond them were figures like Lord Hengmu. The threshold of the 8th Tribulation Realm was around 3 million divine power. 5 million was the normal strength of an 8th Tribulation Realm. At present, with his basic divine power at 1.5 million, Jian Wushuang didn't feel any pressure. If he forcefully used treasures to increase it, his state as a sixth tribulation realm expert could probably push his basic divine power to 2 million. Add to that the super-eternal ancient transformation and the origin source Tao arena, and his combat power would probably be comparable to an ordinary 8th Tribulation Realm expert, if not more. The sword that dealt with Qi Juxiao back then was enough to prove it. When it truly erupted, the instantaneous surge in power was immeasurable. Of course, at that time, it was still because of the free extreme intent technique. This was still Visa's reward, which reminded him of the utmost freedom intent technique. Meet the strong with strength, meet the weak with stronger. He had seen this route long ago on Broly. As the opponent grew stronger, his own strength would also continue to soar. Seemingly endless, and terrifyingly so, the utmost freedom intent technique. He could call it the extreme freedom intent technique. Far more powerful than he had imagined. Meeting the strong with strength was just one aspect. There was also the extreme freedom intent technique's ability to disregard space and time. Space-time couldn't confine it. This was the secret technique of the gods. Only the gods could create it. Previously, it was just the tip of the iceberg, and he already had that kind of eruption. If he obtained the upper half, then he would truly soar. While others entered the Wanlu Willow for rebirth, he was different. He had to fatten up that cat. Completing Weiss's instructions and obtaining the upper half of the extreme freedom intent technique. Returning to deal with Mieshang would be more certain. Technically, by now, Fan Shenfeng should be almost back to the Qishan Temple. I wonder how things are going. Crack. Just at this moment, the old monk completely absorbed the divine life power and also woke up. Then Divine Wood King also woke up. Divine Wood King was first stunned. Then he discovered his increased divine power and a hint of joy appeared on his face. Like Jian Wushuang, he felt like a good start had been made. Is this the interior of the Wanlu Willow Divine Tree? Looking up at the still dancing green vines. And the space around, warm but tinged with blood. It felt surreal. The old monk began to explain. This is indeed the universe of the Wanlu Divine Tree. Haven't you noticed that time here seems to flow faster? What? Jian Wushuang was taken aback at first. Then a strand of his origin entered his own origin source universe. He corresponded the flow of time. His eyes were confused. The division of time is complex. But there is one point of reference. That is the space-time of the main universe and his own origin universe. The space-time of his origin universe flows fast, and compared to the main universe, its space is also weaker. Currently, the flow rate of Jian Wushuang's origin universe is thousands of times that of the outside world. Gravity is also thousands of times stronger. When the flow of time in his origin source universe is practiced to be equal to that of the main universe, it can be considered complete mastery of time. But that standard is too far away. Currently, only on Tianqing Mountain, because of Weiss existence, the flow rate is the same as the outside world. The space there is also more stable. Even more stable than the outside world. And under Wanyu's testing, the flow of time inside is actually millions of times faster than that of his own origin source universe. Plus the thousands of times of his own universe. It's billions of times that of the outside world. The gap with the outside world is too great. Even if the universe of Wanlu Divine Tree doesn't cultivate spacetime, it shouldn't be so exaggerated. Don't be surprised. The fast flow of time in Wanlu is because of the severe passage of life. In this place, one era is probably equivalent to a change of epoch in the outside world. If there's still some attachment to the outside world, time must be seized to help our master become the god of life as soon as possible. The old monk finished speaking, not forgetting to flatter Danbao. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang felt a little panicked. If he really gets trapped here for an era, then Qishan Temple would be finished. Let alone an era. Even 10,000 years wouldn't do. After listening, Danbao shook his head, with a gleam in his eyes and said, "It's not entirely true. I can sense a force of spacetime, separating Wanyu's universe into two layers, as if opposite to the corresponding spacetime. The flow of time there may be slow, while here it's fast. Not in vain is he our master, to sense from such a distance. The old monk's eyebrows raised at this moment, growing more excited as he spoke. Indeed, beneath Wanliu's universe, there is a vast continent separated from it. That continent has many tribes, including your human race and the dragon race. I once went down there. It's similar to the ancient Wood continent in the outside world, nothing special. I didn't stay long and have always been in the universe of the higher heavens. The continent below is called the ancient desolation world. Jian Wushuang's eyes changed dramatically upon hearing the words, upper realm. He directly rushed in front of the old monk, astonished. You said higher heavens? Yes, it's the space-time we are currently in. How do you know? The old monk was also surprised. The term higher heavens was only used in the Wanlu universe, and people from the outside world wouldn't know. Whoosh! Lord Hangmu also woke up, and upon hearing about higher heavens, he calmly remarked, higher heavens isn't any stronger than the ancient times. It's all dominated by that guy called Qian Deng. It's more comfortable in the era of ancient desolation. You mean Qian Deng ancient Buddha? The old monk sneered. When I was around, he was nothing. Jian Wushuang listened carefully, but he was deeply shocked. It would be best if it's the same name. If it's the same place as Mieshang's higher heavens, then it's all over. How could Mieshang's shadow be seen everywhere? Jian Wushuang was puzzled. Although unwilling to believe it, he couldn't help but ask, Senior, is there a powerful figure named Mieshang in higher heavens? Mieshang. As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. The old monk's eyes flashed. Shaking his head, he said, Never heard of it. Usually, the acquaintances I have in higher heavens are all 8th Tribulation Realm experts. How strong is this Mieshang you're talking about? Maybe I was mistaken. I once knew a friend named Mieshang, and he came from higher heavens. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly and shook his head. But the doubt in his heart was not dispelled. He knew the true background of Mieshang from the starry sky, and he even brought Babidi. This was stated by Babidi himself. But Babidi never mentioned higher heavens. And Mieshang obviously visited the 9 great spacetimes. Maybe even the ancient Wood continent, or the universe of Wanlu, taking higher heavens away from this place. But now higher heavens was intact. Perhaps the Mieshang from the outside world comes from the future. The future. Anything is possible. If there is a super-existence who controls time and space alone, not restricted by the supreme law rules, can travel to the future. The Mieshang from the outside world is from the future, and the current higher heavens is from the past. The two have no temporal connection, but causality adds up. Quite interesting. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered, glancing at Danbao. Perhaps Danbao was more suitable for Mieshang, because he is the god of life from the future. If Mieshang is also striving to become a god, or perhaps Mieshang was originally a god? God of death. This is the oldest god position. Lord Weiss, is there a position of the god of death in the current North spacetime? He couldn't help but ask Weiss. Now Weiss had something to ask him, so it shouldn't be a problem to ask a question. At this moment, Weiss was leisurely drinking on the highest secret realm of his origin source universe, Tianqing Mountain. Upon hearing this question, he replied calmly, Yes, straightforward. Jian Wushuang's heart stirred, his courage bolstered, and he asked, Lord Weiss, is the name of this god of death Mieshang? I don't know. I don't deal with such minor gods. Minor gods? This left him speechless. The god of death was quite a significant figure equivalent to the god of life. And yet they were considered minor gods. Weiss's spectrum seemed a bit too broad. Lord Weiss, I've always been curious. Can beings who control time or true godly power traverse through time and space? This time, Weiss sat up straight. Originally bored, seeing Jian Wushuang's numerous doubts and sincere expression, he opened up. Firstly, they're not true gods, they're called celestial gods. Secondly, traversing time and space is possible, but altering it is not. Within the divine hierarchy, there's also a being called the god of spacetime who regularly cleanses some past timelines. Otherwise, wouldn't this world fall into chaos? Jian Wushuang was even more astonished this time. He hadn't expected such unexpected insights. At the same time, he abandoned his previous plans of traversing time and space. But that's a story for later. Right now, he needed to figure out if the higher heavens here had any connection to the higher heavens mentioned by Mieshang. In his view, this was the most important, and it was very likely there was a connection, because this was the universe of life. Mieshang devoured him for the power of reincarnation. The limit of the power of life was the God of life. So the limit of the power of reincarnation would be the God who controls reincarnation. This was obviously a position stronger than that of the God of death. If that's the case, then he had reason to suspect Mieshang was the God of death. When he initially traversed time and space, he encountered Moro spacetime, not the former Mieshang, but the Mieshang who had returned to the original universe. He deliberately left this layout in the heart demon, waiting to trap him. For the sake of this illusion, to make him think it was Mieshang who had laid out the plan before. But it wasn't the case at all. This was simply Mieshang's trap, coupled with the fact that he himself was the most likely to become the God of life. If Mieshang was the God of death, the moment he became the God of life, the other party would probably show up, and then devour him, evolve into the God of reincarnation. In the past, he didn't understand the gods. He thought Mieshang was for the power of reincarnation. But as he gained more experience, he realized that even with mastery of the power of reincarnation, it might not be possible to surpass the ninth tribulation realm. Now it seems, his speculation was correct. Mieshang secretly traveled through time, plundered the future higher heavens, and then moved to the Moro spacetime. From that moment on, he began to lay out his plans. Danbao initially represented the power of all things, just like the former master of all things. Later, when the master of all things fell, Mieshang saw him through the future and collaborated with Qixin. And then there was the matter in the Qixin temple. Now he's at the Wanlu divine tree. Everything is converging on the godly position. Mieshang's target is not him, but the God of life. Plundering the future higher heavens was to cultivate the original master of all things in the Moro spacetime, the current higher heavens. Most likely it's where Danbao will find his calling. Maybe this time he escaped from Mieshang. But Danbao couldn't escape. There's just one thing. He couldn't figure it out. Why is Mieshang's strength so inconsistent? When he's strong, he's terrifying. But now looking back, Mieshang may just be the top 8th tribulation realm. Because Dongjun's strength isn't that great. Perhaps it's to hide his strength. This is just his speculation. Or it might be just as Weiss said, just a minor god. Seeing Jian Wushuang's worried expression, Weiss spoke up, "Don't overthink it. Time travel isn't that easy. If it's your own time, you can travel as you like without anyone caring. But if you dare to travel in the main timeline, that's a serious crime. If you can report someone, I'll reward you." Really? Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up. Perhaps Weiss's appearance changed some future scenarios. The position of the God of life was originally his. But with Weiss's appearance, everything changed. In the end, the position of the God of life became Danbao's. And Mieshang missed out. Of course. Weiss stood up, tapping the ground with his scepter, his voice low. "Gods, after all, come from mortals. It's normal for there to be some treacherous ministers and thieves among them. For the sake of becoming stronger and mastering more, sometimes there's no bottom line at all. Once discovered, I will personally eradicate them." With those words in mind, Jian Wushuang finally felt at ease. If it was indeed Mieshang's plan, Weiss was his ultimate trump card. With Weiss by his side, he had no worries. If Mieshang wasn't a Grim Reaper, then he would meet a far worse fate. With his current strength, Mieshang might not even be his match. And with the presence of Elder Blue and Divine Wood King, among others, it was even less likely that Mieshang would dare to come. Regardless, he had nothing to lose. If Mieshang truly was a Grim Reaper, then he would be doomed. With Weiss's intervention, he could relax. And if Mieshang wasn't a Grim Reaper, it would be even simpler. Without that sense of threat looming over him, he suddenly felt much lighter. He took the opportunity to inquire further, "Lord Weiss, When you say that the gods come from mortals, does that mean you're not immortal? The gods come from mortals. He understood this. Danbao had become the god of life, ascending from a mortal. According to what Weiss said, could it be that Weiss was naturally a god? You're right. I was born a god in the starry sky. Weiss chuckled, covering his mouth as he responded. Jian Wushuang blinked, feeling like he couldn't comprehend. Celestial gods, star gods, true gods. He did know about true gods. He himself had once believed he was one. But unfortunately, he entered the original universe and discovered the existence of the Emperor. With the Emperor, there were tribulations and the Universe Master. Now, various gods were appearing. He was indeed a bit confused. He decided to stop worrying about it. With his increasing strength, the burdens weighing on him were becoming lighter and lighter. Everything seemed like child's play to him now. That was the advantage of having great strength. He had confidence. Unlike when he was with the Emperor, unable to even move in the face of Mieshang's pressure. He couldn't even catch his breath. But now it was different. The state Mieshang was in before couldn't withstand a single blow from him. Even if Mieshang had tricks up his sleeve, he was confident now. Once this was over, if Mieshang had no connection to this place, he would set out to find others, or return alone to the Qixin Temple to completely eradicate Mieshang. As for the 9 great spacetimes, he would explore them slowly in the future. He was still quite attached to his homeland world. Returning to his hometown, there was an inexplicable sense of security, even though most of the beloved ones were long gone. The ancient Wood continent was not truly his home, and there was always a sense of distance lingering. Although he met some reliable individuals in the ancient Wood continent, it still lacked the warmth and familiarity of his hometown. For instance, when he met Jin Wuyang, the latter was still an immortal, and when he befriended Hu Qing was just a child, much like Danbao, each entrusted with a lifetime bond. Such friendships were far stronger than those shallow ones with Wu Li, whose profound schemes naturally led to shallow relationships. This time, fortunately, nothing went awry, or else Wu Li would have faced consequences. He still remembered being fooled by Lord Hengmu. Consciousness returned to their true selves, and everyone woke up, their divine powers slightly enhanced, with noticeable changes in the weaker ones. Like Wu Li, whose divine power now reached 1.5 million, thanks to his influential father who facilitated such growth. It was strange indeed that a special life force of the 8th Tribulation Realm could produce such effective black pills, enhancing divine power significantly. Jian Wushuang's increase, on the other hand, relied solely on the skeleton of Dongjun. However, there were no more treasures to devour for further advancement. Not only did he need to enhance his divine power, but also his origin source. However, he had not found time to attend to the affairs of the Skysite Heavenly Chessboard, where numerous origin sources of various ranks awaited consumption, along with chess pieces of commanding ranks, each comparable to the 8th Tribulation Realm's origin source. Origin source. Suddenly, inspiration struck him. If he were to invest these origin sources into his universe reincarnation, perhaps he could craft a batch of powerful servants. Yet, reincarnation required more than just life force. Creating simple demon servants was feasible, but forging the reincarnation bodies of 8th Tribulation Realm beings was beyond him. This method required further refinement, time he currently lacked. Upon leaving, on the way back to the Qixin Temple, he would have ample time to delve into these matters. For now, exploring the Wanlu Divine Tree was paramount. Follow me, everyone. This place should be a secret realm within the Wanlu, a test from the God of Life left by the Realm King. There are even better things ahead waiting for us. With a wave of his hand, the big monk led the group along the vines. Indeed, this space was left behind by the Realm King, but its purpose was not merely for them to absorb the divine life power. Things often turned out differently from what one expected, much like Jian Wushuang himself, who couldn't have foreseen becoming the universe master so quickly upon entering the ancient moon spacetime. Following the great monk, they soon exited this particular space. They peeled open a larger membrane, revealing the scene outside. The higher heavens of the Wanlu universe. Greenery abounded, teeming with vitality. Everything was so marvelous. It made everyone's vitality surge, as if countless ants were crawling and bustling in their hearts. First came an irritating discomfort, then that feeling quickly dissipated. In its place was a potential for life bursting forth. Everyone's gaze lit up. Confidence brimmed. It felt like they had completely shed their former lifelessness. Each one was full of vigor. It sparked a second spring within them. The feeling here was even better than the previous space. In this place, Jian Wushuang felt like he could face another tribulation in his cultivation. Many others felt the same. The feeling here is really nice. We didn't come in vain. I feel like by cultivating here, we can improve our strength without resorting to resurrection techniques. Divine Wood King turned to glare at those people, his voice cold. All right, can you show some dignity? We're not just anywhere. Right, brother monk? The monk's expression darkened, and he cleared his throat. It seems like this isn't the higher heavens. After he said this, everyone just paused for a moment, then continued discussing the uniqueness of this place. They didn't take the monk seriously at all. But the monk was getting anxious. He hadn't been here before. He hadn't been to the previous place either. He was just guessing blindly. But he hadn't been here either. He couldn't keep blaming it on the Realm King. In fact, this was the place prepared by the Realm King. It's just that the great monk didn't know. After some thought, the great monk felt that things were getting a bit serious. He knew the direction of the stairway to godhood. Originally, the plan was to directly take Danbao and head to the stairway to godhood. But now, it seemed like things were truly beyond his expectations. If it really was the Realm King making arrangements, then it would be troublesome for him. Master, this place has exceeded my expectations a bit. It's best to be cautious. Let's move forward first. The great monk came to Danbao with a steady gaze. Danbao replied casually, "No problem. Let's just go." The others didn't linger either, following Danbao's lead. They set off towards the new world. The green grassland seemed inviting, tempting one to take a stroll. As they journeyed, they encountered a rather dismal area. Yet beauty covered everything. Not even a single savage beast roamed. Only some unconscious wild animals. After flying for a full day, in contrast to the outside world, it might have been just an epic. But this realm showed no signs of change. If it were indeed so, that would be acceptable. Could only mean they hadn't left yet. However, when Jian Wushuang saw the deer he had encountered several times before, his gaze turned cold. He was sure that this deer was identical to the one he had encountered half a day ago. Their life structures were the same. Danbao also noticed something amiss and halted his steps. "We're going in circles," he exclaimed. The others were taken aback. A day's time was nothing to them. But Jian Wushuang was always mindful of the outside world, so he was sensitive to the time here. After flying for such a long time, crossing the entire Wanlu Divine Realm was not a problem. Even within the Wanlu Divine Realm, which could rival the entire ancient Wood continent, there shouldn't be no changes at all. Moreover, according to what the old monk said, he had never been here. Regard it as a mysterious place. Then they should have flown out long ago. But the result was still an endless expanse. Fortunately, they had brought many people this time. All sorts of experts were present. Lian Xing volunteered and stepped forward. "Fellow Taoists, let me try." As soon as he finished speaking, Lian Xing took out hundreds of small flags and casually scattered them around. 16 star flags. 72 earth palaces. Now, as the incantation was spoken, a sound of shattering echoed around. When they looked again, the flags were gone. Lian Xing looked astonished and exclaimed, "This place is actually isolated from time and space, the land of no return." Everyone understood this immediately. They were somewhat panicked. If it was true, then everything was cut off. It would be impossible to leave. Jian Wushuang, Wu Li, and even Lord Hengmu had encountered such situations. It was the entrance when they came in, where they also encountered the land of no return. That time it was because of the roots of the Wanlu divine tree. This time it seemed to be the same situation. The land of no return. But it wasn't indestructible. "Don't panic. Everyone, there's no threat here. We can explore slowly. Lord Hengmu stepped forward to take charge. But just as he finished speaking, a call from ancient times shook them all. Roar. It was a roar that soared into the sky. Definitely the most powerful exotic beast. Divine Wood King glared at Lord Hengmu and angrily said, "You crow's mouth, you're just unreliable." He was cursing along with the old monk. Both of them had been to the Wanlu divine tree knowing the way. But now they were trapped and facing a threat. After the roar sounded, the earth began to tremble. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath. He knew it wasn't that simple. In the distance, a green boundary monument descended from the sky, crashing heavily onto the ground. The wailing ceased. Everyone looked at the realm monument, their gazes frozen. Could it have crushed something to death? I hope it's as said. Jian Wushuang turned his head, showing a hint of a smile to the seventh tribulation powerhouse who had just spoken, then swiftly rushed towards the realm monument. The crowd didn't seem surprised, because when Jian Wushuang's figure dashed out, there was no change in his original position. It was just a projection of himself. For Jian Wushuang, whose life force was boundless, it was too simple. He was willing to take the risk if it meant a real threat. Then it was time for the people behind him to get busy. Fighting wasn't his forte. Escaping came first. Exploration was also a priority. As his projection shot out, it reached the enormous stone monument. On top, there were green patterns, and some traces left by plants. Very ancient. As his figure descended, he wanted to see if there was an ultimate being crushed underneath. But he found nothing. Maybe he had just scared himself. He carefully inspected the surroundings, finding nothing special or any textual clues, nor any danger. For now, at least. "Come over here," he waved, signaling for the others to approach. Only then did the others dare to come closer. They circled the stone monument 3 times to the left and 3 times to the right, but couldn't make heads or tails of it. "This stone monument doesn't seem particularly special. We shouldn't be too hasty. Since it appeared in front of us, it must be related to us. Since it's not moving, neither should we." "You're quite clever," Lian Xing said impatiently. "Why bother with an inanimate object? It's not worth it. Friends, why don't we take the initiative and let this Danbao friend try his hand?" Agreed. There was no other way. They could only rely on Danbao. He was the protagonist. Even Jian Wushuang had to step back a bit. He voluntarily gave up his position, reminding Danbao in a low voice, "Don't worry. There's nothing particularly tricky inside the stone monument. I checked it all out. Just use your own life origin source to explore." "Got it." Danbao nodded and approached, using his scepter to touch the stone monument. But before he could even begin his investigation, the monument trembled, and strange characters appeared on its surface. Jian Wushuang frowned, looking up at the sky. He recognized the characters, but the characters didn't recognize him. It was the language of the Palunga clan. He had seen some similar characters before, but didn't understand their exact meaning. Among those present, only Blue and Danbao recognized them. After a quick glance, Blue looked surprised. "Brother Blue, what does it say up there?" To be safe, he didn't directly mention that it was the language of the Palunga clan, but privately asked Blue through transmission. "The content here is asking me to gather a certain type of plant treasure." Blue's answer relieved Jian Wushuang. Gathering treasures was the simplest task, as long as it didn't involve crazy fighting. Otherwise, it would be exhausting, fighting and fleeing again. So tiring. After Danbao finished reading, he pondered for a moment before announcing the task. "We need to collect monkey head mushrooms. Each of us needs at least 3. Then we can leave this place." "That's it." Many people showed expressions of surprise. There was nothing else. No rewards, just monkey head mushrooms. After collecting them, they had to place them into the stone monument. It seemed straightforward. But Jian Wushuang and Danbao noticed one thing. This was indeed a test. Originally, they thought that according to the old monk's words, entering the Wanyan would lead them to the ladder to godhood. Now there was no ladder to be found. They didn't know whose trap they had fallen into. The tests had begun. Danbao explained to everyone once again the appearance of the monkey head mushroom and its approximate aura. Only 3 were needed. Having more wasn't a big deal. Jian Wushuang, however, felt somewhat puzzled. Couldn't be this simple, could it? Why were both Danbao and Elder Blue so surprised? Looking at their expressions, it seemed extraordinary. He even resorted to the dumbest method, counting the characters on the stone tablet, then calculating the number of words the two said, but nothing matched up. Elder Blue noticed his perplexity and took the initiative to transmit sound. Benefactor. There's still one last sentence on the stone tablet that Danbao didn't mention. The more monkey head mushrooms collected, the greater the rewards. The rewarded treasure is a kind of life fruit, which can increase vitality. Thank you. Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly. It might be a good thing for others, but for him it wasn't much. He didn't seem to need a life fruit that increased life power. Actually, there was no need to say it. Once Danbao became a god, he could obtain the secret method of resurrection during tribulations. So vitality was useless. By then, the strong tribulation experts from the outside world wouldn't be eyeing him anymore. But what Danbao transmitted next left him stunned. After Elder Blue finished, Danbao also explained the whole situation. The vitality contained in the life fruit obtained here could become eternal vitality. Extremely precious. This kind of vitality could even revive the origin source. Of course, you needed an origin source to revive the origin. 3 monkey head mushrooms could exchange for 1 life fruit. 30 would be 10 life fruits. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang was completely shocked. Reviving the origin source. Resurrecting the strong. In his SkySight heavenly chessboard, there were so many super origin sources. If each one were to be revived, it would be a large group of strong beings. Thinking about this, his interest was piqued. For others, this was a fair competition. Anyway, 3 monkey head mushrooms were enough. So they weren't very enthusiastic. They just dragged themselves to collect them. Danbao and Elder Blue didn't need to make a move. The old monk and divine would king solved it for them. This kind of fruit was just a special treasure for others. It was even more useless for those without an origin source Empress-level expert. Of course, it could be sold for primordial stones. Danbao had the origin source of life. Even more unnecessary. After becoming a god, what couldn't he have? Now, life fruit was just a sesame seed. But for Jian Wushuang, it was a priceless treasure. In the time of a stick of incense burning, he couldn't sense the breath of those people anymore. He could only rely on karma induction. He also relaxed. In an instant, he transformed into thousands, running around, searching for monkey head mushrooms. His main body transformed into tens of thousands. Clones turned into thousands, then hundreds, tens, and individuals. There were over 10,000 avatars searching simultaneously. To ensure sufficient concentration, he didn't divide further. With over 10,000 avatars, he could find one in 2 hours. The area was so vast. Though he didn't dare to claim there were 10,000, 1,000 monkey head mushrooms were still hopeful. While the avatars pursued monkey head mushrooms, his main body checked the origin pieces inside the SkySight heavenly chessboard. Under the vast expanse of Tianqing Mountain, Jian Wushuang stood before the chessboard. His figure materialized upon its surface, amidst the grand chess pieces, where soldiers had already vanished, consumed entirely by him. Those revived initially were feeble and fell to Miesheng's blade. Even those bearing titles were devoured, though losses were heavier. Few remained now, with little future impact. Yet, the royal pieces held significance, especially among the limited few. He needed to choose carefully. Among the title-bearing pieces, the weakest were at the 5th tribulation level, while the strongest hovered around the 7th. Conversely, the weakest royal piece stood at the peak of the 7th tribulation, and the strongest neared the pinnacle of the 8th. As for the 3 god-ranked pieces, their essence was almost comparable to spacetime, though slightly inferior within the chessboard's realm. What was my teacher's intention in leaving me this chessboard? Pondered Jian Wushuang, lost in thought. The SkySight heavenly chessboard held various functions, like the general's armor, now redundant since he possessed the super-eternal ancient transformation. He required stronger artifacts. However, despite his efforts, mastery over the chessboard eluded him. It seemed more like an ornament than a treasure. Could these pieces be a test for me? If so, it would make sense his origin source transformed into pieces, engaging in a match akin to the first true king's method, though unsuitable for him. The chessboard symbolized the cosmos, its deeper meaning intertwined with primordial origins. Even now, he couldn't discern if reviving the pieces aligned with his teacher's intentions. At this juncture, he couldn't conceive of any other utility. It seemed like the only method available. The complexities of origin source. Jian Wushuang shook his head, a flash of insight sparking in his mind. Each piece harbored a distinct essence, akin to life and death, seemingly irreconcilable yet logically fusing to become stronger. Perhaps this was an opportunity. Jian Wushuang's eyes gleamed as he casually seized two royal pieces, both at the pinnacle of the sixth tribulation. Two origin source emerged from the pieces wood and earth. These complementary essences, when combined, enhanced each other. With earth, wood flourished. With earth's essence, wood's origin source thrived. This was a principle. Two origin source without conflicting directions smoothly merged. Their fusion elevated the origin source's strength by a tier, barely reaching the threshold of the seventh tribulation. Perhaps reviving them one by one isn't maximizing benefits. Consolidating these origin source might not only familiarize me with them but also create stronger ones, aiding future cultivation. Perhaps that was my teacher's true intent. Jian Wushuang marveled at the foresight of teacher Xianxia. Devouring these origin sources was the crudest method, limited to absorbing only 2 or 3 layers at most. However, through fusion, immediate comprehension of an origin source's application was possible. It resembled a form of practice, offering the greatest assistance. With determination, Jian Wushuang began categorizing and fusing the origin source pieces. Initially, he focused on the royal pieces, dozens of them, each interwoven with myriad origin sources. He only needed to condense a peak-level origin source of all things to succeed. Regrettably, having devoured so many pieces earlier, he now realized the waste. Otherwise, he could have condensed the perfect origin source of all things, facilitating the fastest fusion with the royal pieces. The limitation of the past layout was partly to blame. Back then, the focus was solely on reaching the pinnacle of strength. But now, with a calm mind, it becomes apparent that the best path is often the one pointed out by a mentor. Fortunately, his life power could transform all things just as effectively. He could condense the primordial essence of all things before him and promptly restore them to perfection. Any missing rules could be supplemented at his discretion. With his current power and understanding, he had mastery over the universe, bordering on the divine level of creation. Establishing rules, crafting everything anew, he guided the pawns of destiny back to their origins. Those labeled as commanders represented the ultimate destiny of all things. Life was but a part of it. It all traced back to what he had seen in the Life Palace years ago, profoundly influencing his life. He now possessed the power of life. The power of death he could wrest from Mieshang. Reincarnation was no longer a concern. His own origin space was now perfected, and his cultivation time was dedicated to the future. The framework of time and space had been laid out. The cycle of time, if what Weiss said held true. Life and death were but minor divine positions. Reincarnation stood as the second-tier divine position. Above that was the third tier, the cycle of time. But what lay beyond the cycle of time? Perhaps I'm overthinking it. He shook his head. Mieshang's desire to devour the power of life was merely a move in the grand scheme of things. Such magnificence! As a universe master of the sixth tribulation realm, he had already surpassed even the significance of time and space. Somewhat arrogant, Jian Wushuang thought to himself. In reality, paths can be taken one step at a time. But before reaching the end, one must be prepared to turn in that direction. It's always better to be prepared in advance. He had done such things before, always deciding for himself. Now, with the presence of the great god Weiss, he felt it appropriate to seek advice. While his avatar searched for monkey head mushrooms, his origin source avatar leisurely entered Weiss's estate. The vast estate covered 1/10 of Tianqing Mountains territory. The facilities within were still not properly organized. But Weiss seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. The spring he had initially acquired was turned into a well, while its pillar became the fountain at the center of the estate. It was incredibly luxurious. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but envy it all. This was his own universe, but his master hadn't arranged much in it. There was only a dilapidated wind pavilion, which paled in comparison to Weiss's grand estate. Though he could transform it directly, it lacked spirituality and was devoid of some liveliness. He strolled towards the lakeside where Weiss often lingered and indeed found Weiss playing with the cat. The purple-skinned cat looked pitifully thin. The first life in the universe had been turned into a cat by Weiss. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but laugh and cry at the situation. "Weiss, my lord!" Arriving at the lakeside, he didn't hesitate, simply found a spot and sat down. After greeting, he observed Weiss amusing himself with the cat, showing no signs of urgency. This cat was from his universe, yet he couldn't sense any cat-like aura from it. It was indeed quite unusual. "You've entered the Wanlu universe. Why do you still have time to come here?" Weiss casually asked as he played with the cat. "If there's something, just say it. I'm in a good mood now and might tell you some very mysterious things." This cat. Jian Wushuang didn't immediately get to the point but instead inquired about the cat. He truly couldn't understand why Weiss insisted on turning the first life in his universe into a cat. He's not just a cat. He's the future god of destruction. Weiss picked up the purple, skinny cat, holding it up and continued, "Be careful with your words. He holds grudges. God of destruction?" Jian Wushuang was surprised. What kind of god is that? God of destruction. It was the first time he had heard of it. A cat becoming a god. It sounded absurd no matter how you looked at it. Even if Weiss had the means to alter the supreme rules, he shouldn't be able to casually turn a cat into a god. "I can tell you now, but you won't understand. However, there's one thing I can tell you. Originally, you were the chosen one for the god of destruction, but judging from your performance, it's getting worse and worse and—" The last words lingered on the tip of his tongue, but Weiss swallowed them back, saying calmly, "I can only say that perhaps you'll have a better position. Could it be that I'll truly become a god in the future?" For a moment, he forgot the purpose of his visit, consumed by curiosity about his own destiny. Such curiosity was inevitable. After all, who wouldn't be curious about their future? Otherwise, why would there be so many fortune-tellers among the common folk? Speaking of which, Hu Qing could predict the future with just a glimpse of Zen. He was favored by time and the finest practitioner of spacetime. Given the chance in the future, he would have Hu Qing predict for him. But don't dwell on that. Let's talk about your matter. Weiss, aware of his purpose, didn't dwell on the topic. This time, Jian Wushuang got straight to the point, expressing his dilemma. Upon hearing it, Weiss chuckled, covering his mouth. "You're not thinking big enough. You should consider the vast expanse of stars above your universe. That way, your aspirations will broaden." "Really?" He became excited instantly. He knew he must be the chosen one. How could he not be? But then, Weiss poured a bucket of cold water on his enthusiasm. "You're quite audacious in your thoughts. There are indeed hierarchies among the gods, but these divisions are fixed. If you want to become a stronger god, you need to strive as much as possible in the mortal realm. Moreover, each position you choose may not be vacant. So, don't be too greedy." Weiss shook his head, providing an example he had seen. It was the founder of ancient moon spacetime, that celestial maiden. Her path was once broad. Her vision was vast. But she ultimately failed. Observing the entirety of ancient moon spacetime, Jian Wushuang could see many peculiarities. Like the Wanlu divine tree in the ancient Wood continent. It was evidently on par with the celestial maiden. Yet she managed to leave behind this willow. Then there was the Wu Hua secret realm. What existed there was also unique. It was a kind of void power, clearly similar to the Wanlu divine tree. These powers were within easy reach for the celestial maiden. If she had intervened once, the power she wielded wouldn't be ordinary. It would be a level higher than reincarnation. That celestial maiden once held many powers. In the end, she aimed to break through into virtual life, replicating another virtual starry sky around the central one. Jian Wushuang's eyes widened upon hearing this. This was many levels higher than what he was currently considering, such as the cycle of spacetime. If he were to create another starry sky himself, he had the audacity for it. But confidence, well, that was another matter. Yet, the celestial maiden dared to replicate an identical starry sky within the existing one. This is somewhat exaggerated. To put it bluntly, it's like picking peaches. If this expanse of starry sky had an owner, would they spare her? No wonder it fell. Since you're so bold and want a challenge, then go follow the path of the celestial maiden. I'll collect your corpse when the time comes. Jian Wushuang shook his head solemnly, firm in his resolve. I won't walk someone else's path. I only want to walk my own. I didn't expect the heavenly maiden's influence to be so great. Even if I fall, it's not regrettable. Replicating the starry sky, creating two identical individuals, two similar flowers, it wouldn't be so easy. Weiss shook his head lightly, a hint of regret still in his eyes. Here, when he mentions two flowers, he actually refers to two worlds. One flower, one world. Representing people brings even more complexity. This made him think of Xianxia again. The celestial maiden and Xianxia are intricately connected. That's a disaster for him. It's not a loss if she dies. Otherwise, he'd end up dead at her hands sooner or later. Now, within Wanlu, the stairway to godhood and the source of life's power are both in Danbao's control. It means the end for the celestial maiden, with no possibility of turning the tables. This example was a heavy blow to him. In the past, he didn't believe in overpowering all methods with one's strength, defying the words of the gods. Now, after hearing this, he believes even less. His pressure isn't actually that great. Becoming the master of time and space is actually quite good. Controlling time and space, even without traversing the future, he can bear it. Especially for the current northern spacetime. The three ancient beings at this level are equally invincible. Even the gods can't control them, unless one courts death like the celestial maiden did. As long as he doesn't court death, he won't die. All that's left for him is Mieshang. Kill Mieshang and it's over. No pressure. Afterward, he finds teacher Xianyi and they acknowledge each other as teacher and disciple. Perfect. But the teacher has always invested in him. There must be things he needs his help with. He just doesn't want to disappoint him. He doesn't want to regret it later. So he puts pressure on himself. Looking back, he realizes he's been thinking too much. Your origin source on that chessboard is already enough for you to court death. Anyway, it won't be you who ends up dead in the end. As for your own origin source, don't make too many adjustments. You haven't even reached the limit under the law rules yet. It's not too late to plan when you reach the 9th tribulation. Weiss finally reminded him. Using the chessboard to simulate the origin source powers he'll need to integrate in the future. At least there's one chance of failure. Jian Wushuang respectfully bowed. Then he turned and left, back to the foot of the mountain, planning his future. First, it's the cycle of time and space. He first integrates the chess pieces sources from the SkySight heavenly chessboard into the cycle of time and space. Then he'll make other plans. This is quite difficult for him. As for the rest, as Weiss said, it can wait until later. Now is not the time for him to consider it. He can't follow in the footsteps of the celestial maiden. Integrating the temperament of the title into the origin source of all things, forming the power of all things. Then it transforms into the power of life. From all things to life, it requires a unified origin source to integrate. The chess pieces marked with the handsome insignia contained the essence of unity. It's rather convenient. Jian Wushuang's mind sank, immediately awakening to the situation. He felt a tremor in his heart. Could it be that this is really teacher Xianyi's instruction? Perhaps Weiss knows teacher Xianyi but has been denying it all along. He could speculate as such. or he could act as if nothing had happened. Even Weiss had to conceal things, using cryptic and difficult-to-understand matters to enlighten him, perhaps for even greater concealment. Initially feeling somewhat relaxed, he suddenly felt a surge of pressure. He still needed to strive. Otherwise, how could he face his teacher? He didn't want the day of teacher-disciple recognition to be a scene of world destruction. Time passed little by little. In the blink of an eye, he had been here for a month. There were indeed quite a few monkey head mushrooms. His Dharma body had searched for thousands of them. Meanwhile, his main body had integrated a new source of life on the chessboard. Crack! As the life chess piece fell onto the SkySight heavenly chessboard, it instantly transformed into a set of green battle armor. On the chest of the armor, there was a circle inscribed with the word Tribulation. Tribulation armor, replacing the original general armor. Originally, he thought there would be subsequent king armor, god armor. He didn't expect to encounter tribulation armor. He couldn't wait to summon the tribulation armor. As soon as he put it on, a surge of amplified life force erupted. His life force was increased by 100-fold. Not only that, after putting on the tribulation armor, his divine power also increased by a whopping 500,000, directly reaching 2 million. The increase wasn't in basic divine power, but he found that after wearing the tribulation armor, he could also perform the super-eternal ancient transformation. In other words, when he now used the super-eternal ancient transformation, his divine power could soar to 4 million. It was already the standard power of an 8 tribulations realm. This made him even more interested in merging the origin source of chess pieces. Now it was the life force-dominated tribulation armor. If he could condense a death force, the two would merge to become the power of reincarnation. The amplified power would be the even stronger power of reincarnation. This would have a greater blessing for his third sword in the Starry Sky Chronicles. Divine power enhancement was just basic. The most important thing was the blessing of the origin source. This was more important to him. He finally figured out the function of the SkySight heavenly chessboard. Unfortunately, he didn't know much about the power of death. Otherwise, his sword of reincarnation wouldn't have been so weak, unable to display its true power. He still needed to find a breakthrough from Mieshang. In a blink of an eye, he had gone from being watched by Mieshang to watching Mieshang. Phew, take it slow. Now he wasn't in a hurry. His Dharma body returned and merged back into his main body. Danbao had already informed him that everyone had collected enough monkey head mushrooms. He was the only one left. 6,000. They could be exchanged for 2,000 life fruits. But now his need for life fruits wasn't so obvious, because he couldn't revive the chess pieces so early. Those chess pieces needed to help him simulate his own origin source endpoint. If successful, then revival would be cause for celebration. If he failed, it would be all over. He would have to seek out other options. Of course, failure was a thankless endeavor. He would surely mitigate the losses. If he sensed things weren't going well, he'd halt, disrupt the sequence of condensing the origin source, and then revive it. It wouldn't be considered a waste. Those 3 god-level pieces he felt were likely the source of divinity. Whether his conjecture was correct remained unknown. If it were true, he'd have to be even more cautious. Losing even one would be heartbreaking. Taking a step forward, he traversed swiftly. Soon, he arrived at the stone monument. After exchanging greetings with Danbao and the others, he stepped forward to pay the required fee. Seeing the desolation on many faces, he understood that these people probably already knew about the additional rewards. Actually, it's not too bad without the life fruit. It doesn't affect the path of resurrection in the future. It just slows things down a bit. To prevent jealousy or resentment from these people towards Danbao, he deliberately threw a mustard seed towards the stone monument. Although these people already suspected that he had been out for so long and must have found quite a few monkey head mushrooms, no one dared to speak out. Everyone present could tell that Danbao and Elder Blue trusted Jian Wushuang more than any other Dao protector, making him more reliable. They didn't dare to do anything to Jian Wushuang. After probing into the stone monument, he obtained the life fruit, which also meant the completion of the task. Even after obtaining more monkey head mushrooms, he couldn't exchange them for life fruits anymore. With a clatter, he was the last one. As he completed his task, the stone monument began to tremble, emitting a buzzing sound. Everyone shook as the area within thousands of miles around the stone monument suddenly changed. In the next moment, everyone was traversing through space-time, leaving this place behind. After they left, another group of people arrived, led by Babidi and others, lagging behind Jian Wushuang and the others by a step. When Jian Wushuang and the others reappeared, they found themselves in a quiet mountain forest. Looking up, they could see faint beams of light descending, blocked by towering trees above. Great Monk, do you recognize this place? Divine Wood King leaped onto the top of the towering tree's leaves, scanning the surroundings. He was completely unfamiliar with this place, so he naturally looked towards the super powerhouse who emerged from the Wanlu Willow Divine Tree, the old monk. I don't recognize it. We must have entered a special secret realm, arranged by Realm King. As long as we follow the instructions given, we won't go wrong. The monk shook his head, offering an explanation. Lord Hangmu, however, was skeptical, taunting. Then why don't you give us a hint? We can't just wander around like last time. Let's go check out the mountain ahead first. Danbao spoke up at this moment, and the others didn't object. In fact, they had limited options. Since there was a mountain ahead, it was better to go and explore than to argue here. For safety's sake, Danbao shielded everyone with the shield of life as they advanced cautiously. Although they hadn't encountered any danger yet, they couldn't afford to be careless. In the previous space, they had heard a roar. Although they couldn't sense the specific aura, the divine power contained in that roar was extremely terrifying. It was definitely at the level of 8 Tribulations realm. In the universe of the Wanlu Willow, it was normal for powerful beings of any level to appear. They still had to be cautious. Jian Wushuang's thought power continued to survey the surroundings, but he hadn't noticed anything unusual. Instead, he felt that the structure of this place was deeper than the previous space. The power here was also extremely special, as evidenced by these towering trees. Each contained more than 1,000 divine power. The life structure of these clans surpassed that of the human race by an unknown amount. Despite their divine powers now starting in the millions, if averaged out, they were definitely inferior to these towering trees. The grass and trees nurtured by the origin source of life in the universe were so powerful. If it were material life, it would definitely be stronger. The common divine power of the human race was less than 1. It was only after embarking on cultivation that they would gradually accumulate divine power. They were all at the pinnacle of the human race, appearing strong. In fact, in terms of origin, they were not as good as these grass and tree plant lives. Of course, except for those special life forms at the cosmic level. Jian Wushuang was actually a special life form. However, his uniqueness couldn't be compared with those at the cosmic level, just like Qishui back then, who had a natural divine power of 10,000. How could he compare? He was just a special life form born later. If he were counted like this, everyone would be a special life form as long as their divine power exceeded 1,000. Moreover, the current special life forms, such as the Flame God of the Sure Kingdom, were top-notch at the 8 Tribulations realm, comparable to Zhuoyehue. Their basic divine powers were terrifyingly strong. There was also Lord Hangmu and the Great Monk, whose basic divine powers were terrifying. The peak tribes and formidable individuals born from the entire Wanlu universe were certainly surpassing the entirety of the ancient Wood continent. There were few within the 9 heavens and 10 lands that could match their prowess. Just the appearance of the Great Monk and the 2 great battle beasts would be enough to make the ancient Wood continent feel pressured. If they were all to emerge, it would probably take the combined might of the 19 major star sects to suppress them. Though there was threat, there was also opportunity. If one could freely come and go from this place, then the lives here would face the formidable beings of the entire ancient moon spacetime. In comparison, the ancient moon spacetime held the upper hand. After all, it was created by the Celestial Maiden. The 9 heavens and 10 lands. The vast waves surged, attempting to replicate the existence of the starry sky. How could their foundation be lacking? As they departed from the jungle that obscured the sky, They arrived at the foot of a low mountain. The mountain peak was not steep, and its side peaks did not penetrate the clouds. There didn't seem to be anything special about it. But the moment they stepped into the foothills, they felt their divine power pulsating throughout their bodies, a sensation akin to a strong urge to seclude themselves for cultivation. Everyone was eager to try stepping onto the mountain, and Jian Wushuang was no exception. Although he primarily cultivated the origin source, his divine power was not inferior, almost on par with the origin source. The 1.5 million units of divine power in his body were all active. The beast god weapon even resonated with the local environment, causing a dragon roar to erupt from his surroundings, creating ripples. Furrowing his brow, Jian Wushuang felt the beast god weapon trembling, suppressed by an even more powerful innate beast god. Although innate universe treasures were rare, this place gathered the strongest beings of the ancient Wood continent, many of whom possessed innate cosmic treasures. For example, the Mayun Vine of Divine Wood King and Wu Li's wooden sword, a universe treasure bestowed upon him by Lord Hangmu, also resonated and then experienced strong suppression. At last, you've noticed, Brother Wushuang? Wu Li cautiously approached at this moment, whispering, "Could there be some terrifying presence on this mountain? My wooden sword is a branch from the Wanlu tree, also considered an innate universe treasure. I've never encountered such a thing before." Jian Wushuang shook his head, offering a vague response. "I'm not sure either, but since it's related to the innate, there must be extraordinary treasures on this mountain. We'll find out once we go up." This low mountain not only stirred their urge to seclude themselves but also resonated with innate universe treasures. It had already aroused their curiosity. There was no reason not to take a look inside. If there were indeed treasures, it would be up to each individual's abilities and luck. Whoever obtained them would claim them. As long as it wasn't too outrageous, they could keep them safe with the help of Danbao and the oaths they had sworn. No one would turn against each other. The likelihood of encountering treasures was equal for everyone, but the strength levels varied greatly. Therefore, no one would yield to another. Feeling the call, everyone's gaze turned towards Danbao. With just a word, they would rush in. Jian Wushuang, however, wasn't as urgent. Sensing his surroundings with his thought power and finding no danger, he nodded towards Danbao, indicating that it should be safe. It was better to explore. After all, there was no other path. Sooner or later, they would have to go. Might as well let these people take the lead. Of course, such words couldn't be spoken. They had to go involuntarily. Otherwise, it would tarnish the god of life. Danbao could only nod. He was just a child, thrust into this position. But before these people ascended the mountain, he generously bestowed each of them with a portion of life force, which moved many. Jian Wushuang was also surprised. At this point, he truly admired Danbao. It was impossible for him to do the same. Perhaps that's the difference. Let's go. Divine Wood King led the charge. With the Moyun Vine, he had the strength of an 8th Tribulation Realm warrior, albeit not as powerful as his true self. Nevertheless, it was enough for exploration. The vine extended to scout ahead, searching for treasures and the direction of the call. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate and followed along, as did the others. Only the Grand Monk and Lord Hangmu, accompanied by 2 powerful war beasts, stayed behind with the pill treasure at the rear. Divine Wood King, Jian Wushuang, and a large group of 7th Tribulation Realm experts moved away from Danbao's life shield. Even Wu Li charged to the front, standing side by side with Jian Wushuang. "Brother Wushuang, the feeling is quite extraordinary. Why don't we join forces? My 3-foot sword has been guiding me. How about we split the treasures we find?" Wu Li suggested with a smile, but Jian Wushuang had a suspicion in his heart. Although his beast god weapon had been called, the sensation wasn't quite as Wu Li described it. Guidance was possible. That resonated deeply. "All right, we'll find an opportunity to break away from Divine Wood King and the others later. But you need to inform your dear old man. Let them keep an eye on us. In case of danger, they can come to our rescue." Working with Wu Li, there was no way he could lose. Now, considering Wu Li's status and strength, His divine power was at the pinnacle of the seventh tribulation realm. In times of danger, they still relied on him. Fortunately, they had a strong backing, his dear old man, the most powerful presence among them, able to overshadow divine Wood King. Even if this place hid some terrifying existence, if they were unlucky enough to encounter it, they could still be saved. This deal was worth doing. Since they were here, they couldn't just sit back. Moreover, Weiss had instructed him earlier to search for some treasures. Maybe they could find something here. In the crevice on the west side, Wu Li suddenly transmitted, and Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate either. His figure paused for a moment before disappearing into thin air. Taking Wu Li along, they directly left the group, entering a crevice in the mountains. Divine Wood King at the forefront was momentarily stunned, but also wanted to chase after them to take a look. He knew about Jian Wushuang's uniqueness. Maybe he would discover something in advance. And that innate treasure on Jian Wushuang's body made him a bit envious. It might just trigger that call and find the exact location. But then again, as an 8th Tribulation Realm peak powerhouse, following 2 Tribulation Realms, would somewhat damage his pride. And they were still some distance from the mountaintop. It would be better to reach the mountaintop first. Behind him were the Danbao and the Great Monk. Time couldn't be wasted. After weighing the pros and cons, Divine Wood King gritted his teeth, manipulating the Moyun vine, and continued to climb towards the mountaintop. Along the way, he also gained something. Those treasures that had grown in the crevices for who knows how many ages were all collected by him. Just a random herb would fetch him 1,000,000 primordial stones. What a great way to earn money. It was like picking them up. He might not be the universe master now, but that didn't mean there wouldn't be a universe after he reincarnated. Whether it was primordial stones or these herbs, they could all enhance his divine power. The others also obtained some treasures that the Divine Wood King didn't value, worth around 100,000 primordial stones. For them, it was already very good. They could pick them up at will without the need for fighting. It was refining stars that had no interest in herbs. He collected many expensive essence stones, even buying those he failed to snatch on the spot. Many people sold them on the spot too. Overall, everyone had a good harvest. Danbao and the others at the rear didn't care. Danbao was almost becoming a god of life. He naturally wasn't interested in treasures. Blue was the same. Being of the same clan as Danbao, would there be fewer treasures for him in the future? As for the Great Monk, as a Dao Guardian, he naturally wouldn't leave Danbao half a step. And he was a special life form and 8th Tribulation Realm peak. He didn't lack these treasures either. Finally, there was Lord Hengmu. Although he seemed to have suffered heavy losses this time, he actively gave away his treasures. But he also made a big gain. 2 powerful war beasts. Both were enslaved by him. Each of them was a top force in the 8th Tribulation Realm. How could he possibly covet those treasures? Even if there were treasures, he would use them after he reincarnated. Currently, he didn't find them appealing. The Great Monk also received a message from Wu Li at this time. He frowned slightly but didn't say anything, feeling uneasy about Wu Li being with Jian Wushuang. A thread of Thogot force followed Jian Wushuang and Wu Li as they entered the crevice. The crevice near the mountain wasn't particularly wide but was deep enough, especially leading downwards, to access the true core of the mountain. Jian Wushuang led Wu Li deeper underground. It was pitch black all around. The crevice split open halfway up the mountainside, with no crevice above, just darkness all around. Once inside the crevice, after several twists and turns, the entrance's light was long gone. Are we there yet? After delving deeper, Jian Wushuang felt a palpable unease and a sense of foreboding below. He slowed down, intending to ask Wu Li how he was feeling. At this moment, Wu Li took out his 3-foot sword. Only recently did he learn that the material for this 3-foot sword came from the divine wood of Wanlu, making it a natural universe treasure. Entirely green and 3 feet long, it was capable of cutting through the heavens and splitting the earth. It's still down there. You sure? The deeper I go, the more desolate my heart feels. Like there's an inexplicable pressure, voicing his anxiety. He felt like his heart was about to leap out as he delved further. This place no longer had the serene atmosphere that made him want to cultivate again. Instead, it instilled fear in him. Upon hearing his words, Wuli looked surprised, paused for a moment, and then said, "But I haven't felt anything." When this statement was made, Jian Wushuang felt that things weren't as good as he had hoped. Perhaps the summons below was aimed at Wuli. It had nothing to do with him, so he had to eliminate him. That was the only possibility. If he continued like this, he might even be forcibly driven out. But since he had come this far, he could only grit his teeth and continue downwards. Forget it. Let's keep going. He decided to forge ahead regardless. He refused to believe it. Why was it always him who had the bad luck? Following the cracks, he continued downward. A white light burst forth from his body. It illuminated the path ahead. The cracks at the foot of the mountain were very damp, with water flowing down the stone walls. The walls were covered with moss. The further down they went, the larger the spaces between the cracks became. Behind Wu Li, he walked at the forefront. That feeling of palpitation, from pressure to oppression, caused beads of sweat to form on his forehead. But Wu Li acted as if nothing was wrong, following behind him, his eyes darting around, scanning the surroundings, fearing danger. They continued for about 15 minutes. Most of the people outside were almost at the mountaintop. Finally, they discovered something. The cracks were no longer descending but sloping forward. After walking for a while, there was even an upward trend. The 3-foot sword in Wu Li's hand began to hum. This meant they were close to their target. "There's light." Jian Wushuang, who was in the lead, turned a corner and saw light ahead. He glanced back at Wu Li, and they nodded to each other. Without hesitation, they increased their speed and rushed toward the source of light. It wasn't until they reached the source of light that they realized. It was actually an exit. Phew! Exiting the damp crevice, they entered the sunlight. They saw everything in front of them. A huge aerial garden, floating above the water surface. Everything was neatly arranged. There was not a hint of disorder. It was definitely man-made. Jian Wushuang was sure of this. Seeing this aerial garden, Jian Wushuang didn't feel that palpitation anymore. But there was a sense of oppression from the water surface below. Before he could assess the water's surface, Wu Li flew uncontrollably outwards, towards the aerial garden. While he remained standing in place, feeling nothing, flying in the air, Wu Li finally saw the appearance of this place. Looking back, there was the low mountain. They had crossed this low mountain from the crevice, essentially traversing it. This place was behind the low mountain, a huge valley. Mountains surrounded it. In the middle, there was a huge lake. Above the lake was the aerial garden. Jian Wushuang took the initiative to fly out at this moment, intending to catch up with Wu Li, who had also noticed everything. The rest of the group's aura was now on the mountaintop, but it would still take some time for them to reach this place. In a way, they had taken a shortcut. Could be considered a gain being ahead of others. But there were also downsides. In case this place was dangerous, he couldn't handle it. "Brother Wushuang, I'll go in first." Wu Li glanced back at Jian Wushuang, then entered the aerial garden on his own. There, he felt the source of the summons. "Wait for me." Jian Wushuang was anxious, his wings behind him trembling, wanting to catch up. But the moment he entered the aerial garden, he ran into a barrier. He found himself unable to get in. The barrier was green, pulsing with powerful life force. He refused to believe it and attempted to break through with the power of life. But he found he still couldn't get in. Damn it! While Wu Li went in, he couldn't. If Wu Li took the treasure for himself, it would be a big loss. He couldn't understand why Wu Li could enter while he couldn't. If it had to do with the innate treasure of the universe, he should be able to enter too. But once the power of life passed through the barrier, it disappeared. He couldn't traverse it at all. Just then, a huge bubble emerged from the lake below. Jian Wushuang was startled. His figure quickly ascended. The oppressive feeling grew closer. In the blink of an eye, countless eyeballs of a huge beast appeared on the surface of the lake, directly bursting out of the water. Countless eyeballs were accompanied by numerous tentacles. There were also many green vines entwined around its body, similar to the Mayun vine of Divine Wood King. He was startled by the sudden appearance of this creature and hurried to dodge its attacks. His aura suddenly changed, turning blue. Green battle armor also appeared on his body. His divine power soared from 1.5 million to 2 million in an instant. Employing the super-eternal ancient transformation, his divine power skyrocketed to 4 million. Facing the attacks from below, he drew his sword and struck out directly. With his current strength, he could rival the 8th Tribulation Realm. It wasn't a problem to block them. Those tentacles weren't as powerful as he had imagined. He easily cut through several of them with his sword. But the oppressive feeling remained strong. This puzzled Jian Wushuang. He always felt that there was a greater threat lurking, so he didn't dare to linger in battle. Dodging the tentacles, he quickly rushed towards the direction of Lowfoot Mountain. Meanwhile, Divine Wood King had already brought Danbao and the others to the mountaintop. On the mountaintop there was also a huge stone stele. City of the Sky. The stele was activated by Danbao. The 4 characters above were simple. Having suffered from a lack of education last time, they had figured it out based on the words on the monument last time. They had all learned the language of the Palunga clan. So, there was no need for Danbao to translate. It seems to be the floating city below the mountain. The group came to the edge of the cliff together, looking down. They saw the aerial garden that Jian Wushuang had mistaken for. In fact, it was a city in the sky. This time, I'll take the lead. Lord Hengmu saw the city of the sky, joy flickering in his eyes as he took the initiative to step forward. The expression of the great monk remained unchanged. He came from the Wanlu universe and was the most familiar with this place. He was unfamiliar with other places, but he had heard of the legends of the city of the sky. Or rather, he had some understanding of the rumors about the city of the sky. In the Wanlu universe, there was a legend. Legend has it that in a hidden realm within the Wanlu universe, there stood a city in the sky. It was once the residence of a prominent figure, every item within it holding invaluable benefits, including the treasures and legacies left behind by this figure. This individual had intricate ties with the origin source of Wanlu, known to Lord Hengmu, a local. The great monk was also aware of this place and had discreetly informed Elder Blue. However, Elder Blue showed little interest in the matter, only considering a visit if it happened to align with his path, otherwise dismissing it as unnecessary risk. There were opportunities but also threats, and he saw no need to take unnecessary chances, especially with a sizable entourage in tow.